There is obviously weaponry and warfare, there's economic warfare, and there are legal battles, right? How important is that third aspect to the competition between the U.S. and China?
I think it's hugely important, right? We're sitting here looking at, okay, we want this because you owe this, we're going to take this. China clearly wants to say the same sort of thing. This is going to set down in court of law. I think Trump is not
in the U.S. court of law.
I don't know. It's going to be probably all over. I'm sure there's going to be some UK governance in this. There's going to be international. There's going to be a lot of debate over where it should be. The lawyers are going to get rich. In the meantime, I think Trump is going to try and continue what he's done in the U.S. is push boundaries and then prove that I'm wrong. So I think there's a real risk that this gets pretty contentious very quickly. And the nice thing on the economic side, we don't have this kind of advantage over China, but anything military, there's the tyranny of long distances. So Taiwan's hard for us to get to. South America is almost impossible. Chinese navies, it's better than it once was, but it nowhere near can project the power that the U.S. Navy can. So this becomes really interesting on that perspective in shipping.
Okay, so the lawyers get rich. I feel like that's the outcome of this in terms of
the bankers get rich.
Yeah,
the oil executives get rich.
Right, because this is something that you've written about too, Peter. This idea that the U.S. is going to be asking some serious concessions from oil majors who go into Venezuela. And Damien, I want to take that to you. This idea of just how much bonds can really benefit of not just Venezuela, but of oil producers and oil producer equities. Yes, they're up to date, but are we going to look at a situation where, yes, they can go in, but they're going to be confronted with a surplus, more of a glut of oil, and a U.S. government who's not as friendly to them in what they demand for them as the outcome of them entering into Venezuela?
Well, we've been hearing all this talk about $100 billion is necessary to get Venezuela oil back online. It's not that. It's $15 to $20 billion to expand 500,000 barrels per day out of Venezuela. That's still 25% cheaper than the deepwater projects we're seeing in Brazil and Guyana. So there is a benefit from a cost-benefit analysis to go into Venezuela because, look, I mean, a lot of that infrastructure, dilapidated as it is still there. So there's a starting point there. And so, look, I mean, you're absolutely right. This is not about narco-terrorism. It's not about the cartel of the Suns or Trinidad or Aragua. It's about China, and it's about supply chains. And that, to me, is the fact that China, look, has been buying discounted barrels from Venezuela in RMB. Look, the free lunch is over. And so China, if you saw out of Beijing this morning, Beijing called in all the big Chinese banks to say, hey, but we got to assess what your credit exposure is to Venezuela because the world has just changed overnight.
By the way, what other assets are key in this economic warfare? I mean, exactly. So this is what happens there, Damien.
There's utilities. I mean, Alucar used to be an issuer of U.S. dollar debt. There's tourism. I mean, huge coastline in Venezuela. It's a huge opportunity, and that's why I think in any restructuring you're going to see in Venezuela, you're going to have to give some sort of equity to the upside of GDP growth in Venezuela as a kicker to get investors back in there and to get them happy with this current state of affairs. And by that I mean GDP warrants, stuff that's going to link the future gains of creditors to the success of the Venezuela restructuring and transition. And I think you're going to see some sort of stuff along those lines.
Another asset is that I think we don't talk about enough, or not as much as rare earths, oil, and gold, is chip production capacity, right? That's all in Taiwan, or let's say 80 to 90% of it. Does China move to take Taiwan using some pretense, hey, they're selling drugs here too, or do they hold off long enough for us to put chip capacity somewhere else?
So I don't think they're going to do anything reactionary. They certainly don't have the military capability probably today to take this over effectively and seamlessly and keep the chip industry intact. They will continue to put pressure on. I think we could see more gray zone tactics where they either disrupt, via cyber, something going on in Taiwan, maybe they use the maritime militia to spread out. Having said that, we've been a big believer of pro-sector. There's production for security, and Intel's been one of our top calls in that. I think you're just going to see a really aggressive push where the U.S. government kickstarted this, but it's American capitalism that's going to push it to the next step, right? People are scouring the universe for companies that have mining rights that have been unused. What technology do we have that can process and refine things? I think this just tells everyone, hey, this is serious. The world order is changing. We are going to produce and refine things here that we need for national security. Ships is going to be top of that line because we cannot afford to have China do that. And the realization is there that not only can we not afford it, China might do it, and B, we have the resources if we effectively focus to do it ourselves. So I'm very excited about that part.
Well, it also just shows a President Trump who is willing to take drastic actions, even if there is a threat that he gets pushback from markets, from political standings. It throws to the wayside any idea of a taco trade, at least when it comes to geopolitics. So how should we take Trump's threats with Colombia, with Cuba, with Greenland? Should we look at those differently now?
I think you can take a look at them differently. I think in each case, the one thing I want to pull back is I do think there's an element to the cartel attacks here that is understated. So one, right, we have a lot of forced migration out of Venezuela. People have not liked it. If you make it a safer, more productive society, partly by killing off the cartel, that's good. A lot of the crime in the U.S. that has happened from illegal migration tends to be from these cartel members. So if you cut off the head of the snake, do they wither or die? But more importantly, I think this is going to set up the stage for late Q1, late Q2, serious talks with Mexico and say, Sheinbaum, it's now time to do something about your cartels. You can do it with our help, or we can do it without your help. That something is going to be done about the cartels in Mexico, right? We've set up a lot of new rules of engagement. We've shown that we're willing to do stuff. This operation was phenomenal, right? You come in, clearly there was inside help to make it so successful. So he doesn't have the support of Maduro. I think if you're the cartels in Mexico, this is a really strong message to you. And again, that would probably be the best thing that could happen in Mexico is getting rid of their cartels. And then you could really see this North-South America alliance grow and be extremely profitable.
What happens then to those currencies? What happens then to that debt? I mean, I'm looking at WCRS go on the Bloomberg terminal, right? And I put in emerging markets currencies. The dollar has done fairly poorly against a lot of them over the last 4 quarters.
Right, over the last 4 quarters. But now what you're looking at here is a little bit something different. And for me, look, I mean, this is definitely a dollar. This fuels the dollar bearish view from a foreign investor standpoint to the U.S. So I think in the short term, you could see the dollar weaken on this because, as you rightly point out, Trump is showing very little regard for the interests of
the dollar weakening against the broader basket or against
broad dollar weakness. Now let's talk about Latin America. Latin America is rife with high yield. There's Mexico, Brazil, and Colombia, the highest yielding countries from a fixed income standpoint that you're going to find anywhere in emerging.
Hello, my name is DrPaulCottrell. Thank you for joining. We're live streaming on Rumble and YouTube and simulcasting on X Spaces. Please help support the work that I do by sharing the links and asking your social media to follow me. You can follow me on X and GETTR, on TikTok, on Substack, Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. Please go to my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. If you want to help support the work that I do, you can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee. You can also be a paid member to the Patreon or Substack channels. Everything that I do is for free. I have a new feature on my website called Paper under Broadcasts, where you get news that's generated, some top news. I generate a news article a day, and you can read that up and share the links. Under Broadcast, you can also listen to my audio podcast archive that's been uploaded, and you can watch the live streams under Live, Broadcast Live. We're broadcasting live on Rumble with the larger screen and with the telemetry on YouTube. So you get to see how the market, the ones that are watching on YouTube, you can see how the market is moving in real time with the news. The big news today is obviously what happened over the weekend with Venezuela and how it's going to affect the energy markets. But like Bloomberg was saying, it's also going to affect the currency markets. But the dollar, you know what? There's nothing wrong with the dollar weakening for us to be able to export goods. And you got to keep in mind that the dollar was very strong during the COVID years. And we're mean reverting back to a normal 15-year average. So it's not like the dollar is weakening anything beyond a normal level. You have to remember, during the COVID years, other nations, other regions were not safe havens, and their currencies were starting to go down, and everyone was moving into a safe haven, which was the United States. So we're just mean reverting back to a normal level. So I'm not worried about the dollar at all. Now, for the ones that have been paying attention to me, I called it in April. I was saying that the end of the year forecast for the S&P 500 was going to be anywhere from 6,850 to 7,000. Well, guess what? We were in that target. So maybe you should pay attention to me and you'll make some money. Now, the things that I'm in right now, equities, the S&P 500, longing natural gas, and also longing oil, WTI. All right, so right now, oil is trading at 57.96. Intraday trading has been just above 58. Natural gas is going down and is trading at 3.368 at the moment. So we'll see how this evolves. But during the Asian session at the very beginning of the session, oil went down a little bit, not much, but a little bit, and then eventually mean reverted. And during the European session, it started going up a little bit. But it's going to undulate. There's not a big move up or down, so it's pretty stable. But I suspect that that oil will just kind of creep up, I think. Now, because the operation was so fast and it took place when markets were closed, we didn't see that $4 jump that I thought. I suspected it was going to be a 3 to 4 day operation, that we were going to hit through the air through using our aircraft and also hit using our Navy, and then eventually move in. But this was very smooth, very fast when the markets were closed. So we didn't see that $4 jump. And then I said that it would come back down pretty quickly. So markets are pretty stable at the moment. Now, will there be barrels of oil on the market on top of the oversupply that we have currently? A little bit, but not, I mean, the effect of Venezuela to the overall oil market at this moment in time, without rebuilding their infrastructure, is going to be somewhat minuscule. Now, what would drive oil up? Bringing down the inventory that's been building up, but more the rumblings of instability in Iran. That will bring up oil too. So I think because of what's happening in Iran, we're going to probably see oil drift up. Now there is a tailwind. There's a headwind, I should say. There's a headwind to this analysis. There are banks, we don't know why, but there are banks that are going to the Federal Reserve the last several business days at the end of the year and at the beginning of this year that went to the discount window at the Federal Reserve and traded in, it's called a repo, but traded in a repurchase agreement. They traded in their treasuries and mortgage-backed securities. We don't know which banks, who's the counterparties, we don't know, all right? But it was a lot of money. And there was a big jump at the end of the year of $74 billion. There was another hit at $19.5 billion on Friday. I'm going to take a look at it at about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock to find out what's going on with the repo market. But the point here is that for many days at the end of the year and at the beginning of this year, someone needed liquidity. Now the question is it because of counterparty risk with China? Because we just heard that there are many counterparties that are involved with the Venezuelan oil. So we don't know. All right. So that's a potential headwind with if there is some sort of instability in the market because of some sort of illiquidity issue, and that signal is coming from the discount window from the Federal Reserve, we may see equities go down. We may see oil go down. We may see some problems, arise. We don't know, all right? But it was a lot of money. And the last time that we saw these types of blips for the discount window was just before and during COVID in 2020 and in 2019, just the tail end of 2019, there was a big need for liquidity, which is interesting. And 9/11 and throughout the build up of the subprime mortgages in the fall of Lehman. There was a need for liquidity regularly of about $5 million for many years. And there was a lot of activity, and then all of a sudden, once Lehman died out, the need for the discount window radically diminished. So you could see the stress was building up post 9/11 all the way through the subprime problem, through the bankruptcy of Lehman in the discount window data. And then it's quiet until COVID. And then it's quiet until the very tail end of last year. Starts up in June. Then there was another hit in September, another hit in November, another hit in December, and then the very beginning of January of this year. Something is up. This is not normal. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's counterparty risk with crypto. Maybe it's counterparty risk with oil. Maybe it's counterparty risk with some sort of bank or hedge fund. Some people are thinking that maybe it has something to do with shorts with silver. Silver's been going up pretty rapidly. Maybe some hedge funds are tied into a short of silver, and there's a liquidity issue because of that. There may be some margin calls because of their short positions on silver. I don't know what the reason is. I don't think anyone does, because the Federal Reserve doesn't publish who asks for the money. At least in the short term. They may do it in the beige book, and so we won't know who the actual counterparty was, I think, within 2 or 5 years from now. So the bottom line is we're not going to know. And they do that on purpose, so it doesn't create more stress in the market. But the point here is that there's been a lot of access of the discount window, and you're not hearing much about it in the news. So I'll follow it a little bit. I suspect that it's going to die down. But a lot of times when you have these stresses, these types of stresses where they need a lot of liquidity, billions of dollars of liquidity, we're not talking about 1 billion. We're talking, in a very short amount of time, 100 billion. It's a lot of money for a repo, right? So a lot of times it may stay quiet for a little while, and then all of a sudden it rears itself up again. They were able to solve the problem, and then 3 months later something else happens. So I wouldn't be surprised that we may see something emerge in late February or March with the banking industry. Now, if you take a look at the VIX index, I did an analysis that you should take a look at the video. I think it was episode 5 of Warsaw. But the VIX next spike is probably going to happen the tail end of January, beginning of February. There's going to be another spike. The question is, will the spike be less than the previous VIX spike for volatility, or more? If it's less, then things are calming down. If it's more volatility that's going to be happening, and then we're going to have a problem in Q1 and Q2 for equities. So just pay attention to that, what I just said. If you need to let that soak in and just re-listen to what I said, it's really important. VIX is going to spike probably at the end of January, beginning of February. And the question is the stress that's in the banking industry because of the discount window signal, we're not sure if that's solved. And if it's not solved, when that VIX spikes, you're probably going to see some sort of stress in the banking market in February and March. All right? Okay. With that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the great products that I offer. I have ebooks. I have course material in immunology and pulmonology, so you can learn about how your body works, but also great supplements and products that will help to improve your health. It's a holistic approach. something that I do to slow down the aging process and boost up my immune system. Please go to my store and get the structural nano silver soaps. You can get it in charcoal tea tree, lemongrass. You can also get it in lavender and peppermint. Very high quality soaps. They're made from structural nano silver. It will help to neutralize and help to improve your skin health. Use them every day. Get a few bars for your household and improve your health. It's really simple. And in the United States, there's lots of individuals that have cardiovascular problems. Please go to my store, get the omega-3, improve your cardiovascular health. It'll help to bring down inflammation, help to control your lipid profile, and also reduce the stickiness of your red blood cells so you don't overclot. Please go to my store, take the omega-3 every day to improve your cardiovascular health. It's a holistic approach, proper diet and exercise. Make sure you drink filtered water, stay away from processed foods. The more you do home cooking, the better. Control your sugar intake. Do resistance training, about 65%, and then about 35% should be cardio. Make sure you stretch and do balancing exercises to activate that cerebellum. Get plenty of sleep. Have some mindfulness or spirituality. When you apply this approach with proper supplementation, you're going to slow down the aging process. This works. It's holistic, and it's way more. It's much more beneficial to your body than you being dependent on pharmacopoeia. So please go to my store, take my advice, and get the supplements. Get the omega-3. Use discount 5, all caps, discount 5. You get $5 off anywhere. I want you to save some money. It's 2026. Start improving your health. You can do it. All right? I actually tell you how to reduce plaque formation. Not just additional plaque, but how to reduce the plaque that's already there. I tell you how to rebuild your bones. I tell you how to improve your brain health. I tell you how to actually improve your endocrine and your immune system. All right? So just pay attention to me. You do what I tell you to do, and it'll work. It's that simple. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. So please pay attention during this broadcast and get healthy. All right, let's listen into Bloomberg here. But before we do, the S&P 500 is at 6,895. VIX is at 14.93. Euro is at 1.16. Oil's trading at 58.11. Bitcoin is trading at 93,000. Japanese yen is trading at 156. Something that's important is Japanese central bank, the BOJ, they're planning on raising rates throughout the year. This is also predicted by Goldman Sachs in their annual analysis forecast that they released. Now, as the BOJ starts to raise rates, we're probably going to see an appreciation of the yen. So the number that I just read, 156, probably will go down to maybe the 140 range as the BOJ starts to raise rates. Now think about that. If the BOJ starts to raise rates and the Japanese yen starts to appreciate, that means the dollar is going to weaken. So the dollar weakening isn't just because of what Trump did with Venezuela. It's also how central banks are positioning themselves with their rate cuts or rate rises. So keep that in mind. So, and then the natural gas is trading at 3.417. So with that, I think that my analysis that was published yesterday on the S&P 500, we are going to have a resistance level at 7,000 near term, okay? And we have a support level at 6,800 and 6,750, all right? I have a feeling because of the discount window issue with Venezuela, with potential AI burst, who knows, that the equity market may be going up and down, but in a sideways kind of pattern. If there is positive earnings that are released for Q4 and their projected earnings for Q1, Q2 are decent, then we'll see us to test the 7,000 and go through it, go past the 7,000, that resistance level. If things start to seem a little shaky, we're going to start seeing it drift down a little bit. And that's why I say that you need to start paying attention to some of the major support levels of the S&P 500. And that, one major support level is that 6,750, but there's also a 6,400 number based on a fib sequence. So the question is, are we going to be trading sideways and then lose some momentum because of potential slowdown in the economy? We don't know. It all depends on what happens with Q4 data that is released based on earnings and their projection of future earnings. So just keep that in mind, that there's a little bit of unknown there. But I suspect by year end that the S&P 500 will be at 7,000, for the low end, 7,400, maybe 7,500. My top end number for the S&P 500 is about 7,800, maybe 7,850. That's where I'm at right now at the very beginning of the year. So at 1 year, at the end of the year in December, I think that the S&P 500 is going to be at 7,400, maybe 7,850. But as we're moving towards the end of the year, we'll figure out what that adjust. It could go down. It could be below. It could be at 6,500. It just depends on what is happening, especially in Q1 and Q2. But I'm relatively bullish on equities. Now, we're going to see a little bit of undulation in the energy market because of oversupply by OPEC plus. What's going on with Venezuela? What's going on in Iran? There's turmoil that's going on with China. There's going to be counterparty risk with what Trump just did in Venezuela for China. That's going to affect their banking industry. Will President Xi decide he needs to consolidate power and rev up his economy and go towards have a war footing and move on to Taiwan? That's probably going to jack up oil a lot. I think that if Taiwan is attacked by China, I'm willing to bet that oil, if it's trading right now at, let's say, just below 60, it probably will go up to $75, $85, $90 a barrel if China went and tried to attack and take over Taiwan. So, just kind of pay attention. There's a lot of opportunity here in terms of the movements of the energy markets this year.
And the reason why, Anne-Marie, and you just mentioned it, the president, the White House believes, and I happen to agree, we're heading into oversupply. He can lean into this softening crude market and take risk, even with Iran and Russia, which are really more important near term than Venezuela.
Let's bring in now a legend in the oil patch, Ed Morris, formerly at Citi. He's now a senior advisor in commodity strategies at Hartree Partners. He has also advised presidents on oil, helping to shape policy here in the U.S. and globally. I'm happy to say Dr. Ed Morris here with us on set. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Let me first ask you about the comment on softening oil, because I happened to hear you on surveillance this morning saying we could get oil down to $40 a barrel, and that may be why we don't see such a big pop after this move in Venezuela.
So the oil market looks like demand and supply are out of balance, even with what's going on with Iran and sanctions on Iran, the Russia-Ukraine battle. The question is how big that surplus might be, and how much risk there is in the world to put the longs in the market to stop it from falling. But we've had, 3 years of lower and lower oil prices, and part of that is certainly cyclical, and it relates to challenges on the demand side as well as a big surplus on the supply side.
To zero in on Venezuela specifically, when Trump has been asked about various things like, will you let opposition leaders back in? He says, I don't know, I haven't thought about that, but what I have thought about is reviving oil in Venezuela. Analysts have pinned the project at something like $100 billion. Ed, what does a trajectory and timeline look like for getting Venezuela at peak production?
So the timeline and the projection is really long. The timeline has to do with what the very things that Bob McNally said. This is a world of oversupply, and it's a world of risk. And we're seeing not just the third consecutive year of oil prices going down, but the third consecutive year of less investment going into oil because there is more than enough of it to meet the projected supply, at least theoretically. And the problems, have long been, by that I mean a good 3 years, have been Russia, Ukraine, and the distortions to supply chains and the distortions to trade and the sanctions imposed on Russia and the sanctions imposed on Iran. But we see plentiful supply coming out of available for those countries if they decide to put oil in the market and they want to. And we see, strength in the U.S. and people kind of look down at the U.S. and say, well, we're seeing less capital going into the U.S. oil patch, and there are even some people projecting that we're going to have less crude oil production in the U.S. in 26 than in 2025. But if you look at overall liquids projection from coming out of the U.S., natural gas liquids are part of that. Biofuels are part of that. The U.S. is a 23 million barrel a day producer of liquids. It's not a 13.7 or 8 million barrel a day producer of crude only. And on the NGL side, we're 8 million barrels a day producer of NGLs. The world projects that the NGL production is going to continue to grow at about 1 million barrels a day per year. That's about equal to oil demand. NGLs can be used for transportation fuel. They can be used for power gen. They can be used as an industrial fuel. So there's a lot of substitution effects there. And the U.S. is the leading natural gas liquids producer as well. So we're going to see liquids production growth come like May in a world that's not going to likely see much in the way of more than 1 million barrels a day of demand growth.
By the way, you've been to Venezuela dozens and dozens of times, most recently just 3 years ago, right? So how does their infrastructure look? Because as some people say, it could take $100 billion of investment over 10 years. Others say, no, 15 to 20. Like, the infrastructure is still there. It's just degraded.
No, that's two different kinds of things. So the infrastructure to get production growing to from 900,000 barrels a day, more or less, to 1.3 million or 4 is about $20 billion.
Right.
The infrastructure needed to get back to a 3.2 to 3.5 million barrel a day producer is in the $100 billion range.
Right.
And the question is, who's going to take the risk of that investment in a world where oil prices are soggy, when there are a lot of other kinds of opportunities to invest in oil. And when prices go up, we're going to see capital going back into the U.S. oil patch because it's the easiest oil patch to get more oil from quickly. And there are other places in the world like that. Argentina is now booming because its shale play is similar to the U.S. shale play. Brazil is booming because it's become a safe harbor for investment. And even though most of it is offshore, it is not that hard to develop. The same is true of Guyana. The same is true of lots of places in West Africa. So Venezuela is going to have to compete for the capital in other places that are less risky. And the question is, what are the guarantees that are going to be there? President Trump has indicated, and his team of people have indicated, that this is a choice for the Venezuelan government to make. What are they going to do to make it a more attractive place to invest in oil?
Even so, we've seen some, like the likes of Oleg Deripaska, Russian oligarch who himself has faced U.S. sanctions, saying that Washington now has a more controlling hand in this oil market and could keep prices below $50 if they wanted to. Does this change the U.S.'s position in overall international oil markets, or even as it comes to their influence over OPEC plus?
So we have to remember that the basics are not the U.S. government. The basics are the price of oil. The price of oil is what determines who's going to invest and where they're going to invest. And where they're going to invest is a function of how rapidly can you invest it and how safe is the investment. So the U.S. stands out as a very attractive place with respect to a world with very volatile prices. But the U.S., even with all of the energy dominance themes that Trump has in many ways rightfully focused on, The U.S. is not that energy dominant that Washington can, as Washington as a government, actually control the world market.
Can I ask you a question about energy dominance, not related to the U.S., which is interesting, and you talked about that on surveillance, but in terms of what's going on in Europe, why are they so beholden to the interests of still Vladimir Putin? They still directly or indirectly pay Russia for energy. Why can't they, with this glut of oil and all the LNG we could ship them, be independent?
Well, Europe basically is independent. So, yeah, there's the European countries who depend upon fossil fuels out of Russia are very few.
Now, what's really interesting in today's trading for Gush and DRIP, Gush is a ETF to long energy production, energy exploration and production. DRIP is the short. And what is interesting here is that so the S&P 500 is trading at 6,892, so it's stable, but Gush drops. So bearish on energy at the moment for energy producers, and DRIP skyrockets. So people are shorting actually the energy market, at least the actual companies. Now, if you want to long natural gas, or I'm sorry, not natural gas, oil, you can do UCO or SCO for shorting. All right, SCO is actually going up, so you have a slight drift upward on WTI for oil, yet you have the actual companies within the S&P 500 that are energy producers getting short.
$19.10, so for a long time. Europe's position is one of massive vulnerability as compared to other places.
We could do this all day, and I wish we could. Not enough time with you. You'll have to come back and join us very, very soon.
Okay, so there was a question that was asked about neuropathy. All right, now there's many types of neuropathies, especially in the legs. You know, some of it's due to injury. Some of it's due to diabetes. Some of it's due to poor blood flow. All right, some of it's even genetic. All right, but there's many different types of neuropathy. Now, most in the United States is due to diabetes and poor blood flow. All right, so let me talk about some supplements that are dual purpose, but that can also help with neuropathy. Now, turmeric will bring down inflammation and soak up free radicals. Now, you got to remember, free radicals and inflammation does damage to tissues, including nerves. Okay, and at the tips of the nerve. Now, as long as there's not too much damage to the tips of the nerves, your peripheral nervous system can regenerate. Your central nervous system cannot, but your peripheral nervous system can. Now, so basically, turmeric brings down inflammation, soaks up free radicals, and when you do that, you're helping your immune system and your endocrine system, your brain function, because you're reducing inflammation at the brain level, at the around the neuron, and maintaining the myelin sheath. Well, you have a myelin sheath in your peripheral nervous system too that you want to maintain. So the research that I did on autoimmune disease when I was at Harvard was to bring down the pro-inflammatory cytokines using TAT protein. Well, when you do that, you can actually help the peripheral nerves to actually improve and remodel. All right, because the treatments that I was investigating for my research was autoimmune disorders that attack the nervous system. All right, so you want to bring, the whole point here is you want to bring down inflammation. Turmeric will bring down that inflammation. So like I said, it's going to help with your cardiovascular health. It's going to help with your immune system by boosting up your immune system. It'll help to protect the myelin sheath at the brain level, but also at the peripheral nervous system level. All right. Ashwagandha root is going to control the blood glucose levels. So people in the United States that have high blood glucose, because of diabetes or whatever, well, that's going to attack and create inflammation and attack the peripheral nervous system. And so you're going to have some sort of neuropathy. Now, so you want to control your blood glucose levels. You got to stay away from the sugar, control the blood glucose levels. Now you can do that with the ashwagandha root. This will help to control that blood glucose level and bring down the cortisol levels. Now, cortisol, when it's elevated, usually when people have chronic pain, they have elevated cortisol levels. Well, cortisol is just going to damage the tissues over time. So you want to bring that down. So you want to bring down the pro-inflammatory cytokines with the turmeric. You want to control the blood glucose levels and bring down the cortisol with the ashwagandha root. And lignans, you supercharge all this with the lignans. This will also help with your immune system and endocrine system, but it'll bring down that inflammation and soak up those free radicals. And when you're allowing for your nerves to have less stress and allow them to remodel, peripheral nerves remodel, you will eventually heal. Now, sometimes when you have neuropathy, you may actually have more pain when your nerves are remodeling. And then eventually the pain will start to abate and you start going back to normal. But the key is not to let this fester. It has to be taken care of right away. So point here is that bringing down inflammation, controlling blood glucose levels, soaking up free radicals is going to help with your peripheral nervous system. Now, I also have, for temporary relief, a new product called Super Strong Relief. You apply it topically on aches, sore muscles, sore joint pain. It's temporary relief though. You can also use it for a headache. You can apply it to your temples or around your neck to ease that stress and reduce the tension, and that will allow you to reduce your headache. But this will help with muscle or some sort of joint pain and you want some temporary relief. This works really well for that. Now, in terms of additional remodeling the peripheral nerve, another thing that would be important to take is the C60. And C60 is a very strong antioxidant. And how this works is that if you soak up free radicals, you're reducing stress, you're reducing inflammation. So taking the C60 would also help with reducing the core of why the neuropathy is happening. See, you got to get to the root cause. The root cause is inflammation. If you can stop the inflammation, then the body will have an opportunity to heal. But if it just stays there and it's chronic, then the peripheral nerves start to degrade, and it takes much longer to be able to remodel, if ever. It depends on how much damage has happened over the years. So those are some things that are happening. Now, there are other people that have pain in the joints, and that would be, you want to take collagen, and I also have another product that I've been just talking about. I'll talk about it later in the show, but it's the collagen, which helps to actually remodel cartilage and help to reduce the pain from that joint having its cartilage being degraded. All right. So, but this is more related to joints, not so much neuropathy. But hopefully that helps. It's about bringing down inflammation, and it's about controlling your blood glucose levels, and it's soaking up free radicals. All right. With that, let's listen to some of the news here.
Maddie Rivera with the latest on the president's plan moving forward. Maddie.
Good morning, Carly and Todd. That's right. There are a lot of questions of how exactly the U.S. is running Venezuela. Maduro's handpicked vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, is now the acting president. But Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the U.S. will be running the country's policy to make sure that American interests are addressed. And that includes stopping drug trafficking and making sure that oil revenues don't go to the benefit of U.S. adversaries. And in that sense, the president indicates the U.S. is making the rules.
Who's in charge of Venezuela right now? Have you spoken to the newly sworn-in president there, Rodriguez?
We're dealing with the people. We're dealing with the people that just got sworn in. And don't ask me who's in charge, because I'll give you an answer and it'll be very controversial.
What does that mean?
It'll be we're in charge.
You guys spoken with her?
No, I haven't, but other people have. Yeah, at the right time, I will.
So Rodriguez and Rubio have spoken. Notably, Rodriguez had a much more defiant tone, claiming shortly after he was ousted that Maduro is the rightful leader. But in a new statement, she sounds a lot more cooperative, saying, "We invite the U.S. government to collaborate with us on an agenda of cooperation oriented towards shared development within the framework of international law to strengthen lasting community coexistence. President Donald Trump, our peoples and our region deserve peace and dialogue, not war." The president also issuing warnings to Colombia and Cuba. He says the latter is ready to fall. The rhetoric falling in line with the president's message over the weekend that he wants the U.S. to be surrounded by good neighbors. Meantime, onto that arraignment, Maduro is facing 4 federal counts: narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, possession of machine guns and destructive devices, and conspiracy to possess machine guns and destructive devices. Maduro's arraignment is scheduled for noon.
Madeline Rivera live for us. Maddie, thank you. Let's bring in former federal prosecutor and criminal defense attorney Andrew Cherkasky. Andrew, walk us through what will happen in federal court, like Maddie said, in a matter of hours.
Well, in many regards, this is actually a very standard prosecution that we see in federal court, particularly where it deals with these drug kingpin type of prosecutions. The arraignment will be, in its function, relatively short. It's
I just want to add another thing about the neuropathy. It's really important to realize that some of the damage that's happening on the peripheral nerve is because of that inflammation and free radicals that recruit macrophages or neutrophils. And those start to degrade the actual myelin sheath of the nerve. And then all of a sudden you start feeling pain, movement may be intermittent, and it starts to, the nerve starts to break apart. But again, peripheral nerves can remodel over time. But the key is to stop the signal to recruit macrophages. And normally if it's chronic, you'll have the macrophage stage. You know, if it's acute, it's usually, let's say, a neutrophil, and then eventually it goes to the macrophage stage. But the thing is you want to stop that recruitment. The only way to stop it is to stop the free radicals, stop the inflammation, stop the pro-inflammatory cytokines. And if you do that with the lignans and the turmeric and the ashwagandha root and the C60, then you'll be able to bring down those concentrations of macrophages that are in that area that's starting to erode the peripheral nerve.
The beginning of the legal process. Oftentimes it's just a handful of minutes long. I expect today there's a chance that the defense attorneys may start to make hay about the way in which Maduro was effectively arrested and extradited to the United States to stand charges. But there is good precedent, particularly with regard to the Noriega case years ago, where this exact type of situation is a proper path for the United States to prosecute even a foreign leader. And so I don't think that there's going to be anything shocking or fireworks that go off in the courtroom today, but the defense counsel may start to create some of their legal arguments, and we might start to see some sort of indication from this Clinton-era judge what the perspective is of the court about where this is going.
And with that said, do you think he will be convicted? And if so, what charge will he face?
Well, the charges here and the evidence seems to be overwhelming. The government seems to indicate that they have a great degree of confidence in this. The charges are all related to drug operations, whether it's called conspiracy to engage in narco-terrorism, or whether the charges that we focus on are simply the actual drug running back and forth in the conspiracy to do.
December ISM manufacturing price index unchanged, staying at 58.5. So price index did not change for ISM manufacturing. So controlling of inflation.
So narco-terrorism can create a higher degree of culpability than just the drug charges. But
ISM manufacturing employment rises 44.9 versus 44, so slightly improved. So employment a little bit better. So employment a little bit better, inflation better. Federal Reserve may hold on their rate. And if they hold on their rate, equities will probably go into kind of like a sideways trading that I was concerned about earlier in the broadcast here. ISM new orders rise. So GDP is probably going to go up. So Federal Reserve is probably not going to reduce a rate in January. Okay.
The United States has an extensive investigation and a strong indictment in this case. I don't see any chance of this not being anything other than a guilty. I think that if this goes all the way to a jury, the challenge for the government is going to be the defense motions to try to figure out some way to get out of this. But again, the precedent is very favorable to President Trump and the administration here.
At this point, we all are assuming that there is little to no chance that Maduro is released on bail. But what takes place in the intervening year plus? Because all indications are we're not going to have a trial here until 2027. And that is because, like you mentioned, a lot of the defense motions are going to gum up the works. But also, there's the fact of this was a pretty classified operation. There's a lot that went into this that we still don't know and that we cannot know in order to prevent future events like this when we do this again in another land. So why else, besides the classified information, besides the defense motions, is this going to take so long to get to trial?
Well, this is going to be a complex prosecution. Any conspiracy case is putting all the pieces of the puzzle together for the government just to present their case, but also that time that it takes in order for the government to fulfill their discovery obligations. This is a foreign leader. However, he now being brought back to the United States is fully entitled to all of the protections under our constitutional system in a criminal case. And so that will kind of slowly go through the system of the document exchange, the witnesses. It could be dozens, even 100+ witnesses, depending on how complex the government goes with their prosecution here. I think that one of the big pieces that could slow things down is the fact that probably many of the records related to various aspects of this case will be classified. That doesn't prevent prosecution. It complicates it. It slows it down. It requires certain defense attorney actions to be completed in a certain order, and for the court then to rule on issues related to that can take a tremendous amount of time. So the quickest any case can go in federal court is really no quicker than about 6 to 9 months at the minimum. This case, with the substantial degrees of complexity, I think goes 12, 18 months before we actually see resolution.
Also on the legal front, there are many Democrats out there who are saying that the Trump administration committed an illegal act by capturing Nicolas Maduro without congressional approval. What do you think about that?
First of all, why would you need congressional approval if this is an operation with law enforcement backed up by the military? Why do you need? He was indicted. So if law enforcement is able to capture him and bring him back to the United States, how is that? Why do we need Congress for that? The sad thing is that you have people in Congress that aren't willing to do their job, and things start to fall apart, and then thank God we have a president that's willing to do something. I'm a little concerned about him not doing enough in certain categories. All right. Sometimes he does chicken out. And the rumor was that he didn't really want to do this. He was a little chicken, and people in the circle actually convinced him to do it. And then eventually, you know, it turned out okay. But the reality of the situation here is that you have Congress that's not willing to do their job. And then things start to fall apart. They're not doing a war on drugs. They never have. And oh, by the way, it was the CIA that was using the money from drug running for their black ops. You have Congress not willing to create a strong border. And so there was a lot of porosity. Congress doesn't want to solve the problem. They'll just bitch and moan about it, but they won't solve the problem. They never do. It takes a leader. And then when a leader does actually decide to do something, and it's successful, all they do is whine. How dare you? Well, Congress, do your job. You don't do it. Do the job.
I think it's important to try to differentiate what's a talking point versus what is a constitutional violation. The president has robust authority to engage in diplomatic engagement with foreign countries, has extraordinary ability to enforce the laws of our country, both through military operation as well as through domestic law enforcement action. And so this, when we look at it purely as an extradition from a country that was not engaged with us in fulfilling our need in order to uphold our laws, to have him extradited and face trial in our court system. This was a method that is lawful in our criminal courts under our constitutional system when viewed under Maduro's rights to constitutional due process. This is merely a fight between the left and President Trump about whether he is able to engage in warlike efforts or military actions without explicit congressional approval on every instance. And there is no precedent in recent history of our country of that being the case. Presidents always have a degree of authority for at least some period of time to engage in military operations where necessary. And that's what happened here.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of conflation on the political versus the legal. We must remain clear-minded here. Any discussion of regime change has nothing to do with what amounts to a drug case in federal court with a random defendant, and it shouldn't matter here, even though this defendant is Nicolas Maduro. Andrew Shikowski.
All right, we're going to go back to Bloomberg. They're talking about Venezuela, you know, and Trump, and of course they're interviewing the international affairs guy that's from University of Michigan who hates Trump. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the magnesium and zinc. This will help to boost up your immune system and help with brain function. Magnesium is super important for brain function. And everyone knows that zinc is very important during the winter season. Vitamin C and magnesium. This will help to improve your skin. Vitamin C is super important for your skin health. Vitamin C and magnesium will boost up your immune system and help with brain function. Stack them together, drink it with filtered water. It's really important to take during the winter season. But like I said, if you take it year round, guess what? You're boosting up your immune system. And if you're boosting up your immune system, then you have less chance of contracting something. And when you don't get sick as often, your body slows down the aging process. If you're chronically sick, even if it's for something benign like the common cold, every year, you're aging faster. It's that simple. That simple. Even something benign, you age faster because you have the common cold. If you stop having the common cold regularly, guess what? You age slower. So it behooves you to actually boost up your immune system. Now, my protocol is the most comprehensive, most accurate, and the most affordable that will actually boost up your immune system and slow down the aging process. What I am telling you in this show, all right, is cheaper and more effective than what Brian Johnson, the tech bro that's a billionaire that spends $2 million a year to try to slow down aging. I'm willing to bet that my epigenetics is better than his, and I'm older. I don't spend $2 million a year in trying to slow down aging. Just take the products that are on my store It works. You follow my advice, it works. Right? It's that simple. I'm more accurate than Brian Johnson, the tech bro that that's afraid to die.
There are a lot of echoes and ripples here, but for the moment, I think the real core question is, who exactly is the administration going to work with in order to accomplish its goals in Venezuela? And right now, it seems to me they're banking on stability and prepared to work with the remnants of Maduro's government. If that is in fact the case, then I think the lift is going to be a lot harder. The Venezuelan military has not spoken. Look, they've got about 123,000 total forces. They've been humiliated by the U.S. military. They can't be happy about this. And they're probably relieved in the sense that the president has all but dissed the Nobel Prize winner, Machado, one probably the most popular Venezuelan politician in the country today. So, again, a lot of questions probably should have been asked before.
The big question is why did Trump diss the Nobel Prize winner? Unless, and this is my take on it, the energy companies like Chevron and ExxonMobil did not want her for some reason. I don't know what the reason is, but I have a feeling that it's the energy companies that's basically saying, have someone that you can prop up that doesn't allow for true democracy to make sure that we can be able to have the runway to invest in the infrastructure and pump the oil out. Because you have to remember, to be able to pump a lot of this oil out, the infrastructure has to be rebuilt. Well, for it to be rebuilt, you have to have stability. And to have stability, you probably have to be in control of the government. All right? In a perfect world, which we don't live in a perfect world, you would think, oh, just give democracy to the people. But guess what? There's a high probability that either the government or the military or the people will want to seize the property again. So you have to have some sort of strong man or woman that is under the thumb of the United States to be able to build up the infrastructure again for Venezuelan oil. Now, people would say that's wrong, that's blah, blah, blah. That's the real world. That's the real world and that's happening here. So I suspect that the energy companies didn't want the Nobel Prize winner. Now, maybe there is something else going on with her. Maybe she has poor administrative skills. Or, maybe she would be too much of a divisive individual in the society. I don't know a lot about her. But I have a feeling that it had something to do with the energy sector saying in the ear of Trump, no, to her. But, I could be wrong. It's possible I'm wrong. But we'll see. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the structural nano silver drops. You can get it in blueberry, in cherry flavor, and also in honey and lemon. Now, these drops are very high quality. They'll help to neutralize a throat irritation. You can take them prophylactically. If someone around you is not feeling well, take them right away and create the secretions and protect that oral pharynx and the epithelial cells. That's really important. If you have a throat irritation, take them right away, mitigate the problem. These are very high quality. Get a few bags for your household for the cold season, but also for the allergy season that's coming up in the spring. Again, very high quality. Go to my store and get the structural nano silver drops. All right, let's listen to Cash Jordan. No, not yet. Let's not listen to Cash Jordan right now. Let's listen to CNBC.
All right, sales team, eat lunch. Let's go Greg, why are you eating so fast?
No time, that sales calls are summarized.
You really need to switch to Monday.
So we've had you on the show. We talked quite a bit about Machado, the opposition leader, Nobel Prize winner, also a Trump supporter. I think a lot of people spent the weekend learning about Delcy Rodriguez, the vice president, sometimes called a hardline socialist, other times called a pragmatist. I want to ask you, what does it mean to have her, quote unquote, running the country right now and issuing statements first against the capture of Maduro, now saying she's willing to work with the U.S.?
Well, President Trump has made two critical decisions. One was first taking out Nicolas Maduro. The second was deciding what he was going to do post-Maduro. And it surprised a lot of people that he did not install Maria Corina Machado or any of the members of the opposition living in exile, and instead went with this more, let's call it a more pragmatic route to work with Delcy Rodriguez, clearly looking for stability in a post-Maduro country, to try to affect some of the changes that they'd like to see in Venezuela. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was on all the Sunday shows yesterday, and at one point said that at some point they will talk about a transition to democracy, but not right now.
Yeah, a number of articles over the weekend highlighting that this administration is looking for stability over democracy, at least right now in the near term. I want to talk to you about the stability of Venezuela and what that could potentially mean for companies coming back.
Trump wants to make the situation stable where they can control the government to be able to have Chevron come in and rebuild infrastructure.
We're going to talk a lot more about the oil market, but just in general, this switch to Delcy Rodriguez, at least in the short term, does that stabilize things? Does it stabilize things not only with the economy, but also the military?
Well, it certainly has someone in place who knows the country very well, who knows all of the players. She appears to have consolidated power. We have to see if that remains true. She's known to be a pragmatist. She's known to be someone who said when they had imposed price controls, that was leading to scarcity, and she convinced the country to change that path. So I think that she's somebody that is seen as a person that the government can work with, that oil companies can work with, if they are convinced that there's a framework in place that protects their investment.
All right, MCC, please stay with us. I'm going to bring in another voice right now. I want to bring in Professor Alejandro Velasco from NYU. Professor, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
I want to begin with the same question I was just asking Michelle. Exactly what does it mean, in your opinion?
And you think about what happened with the oil industry when they took it over. When Venezuela took over American company property, all right? They lost tens of billions of dollars. Maybe more, maybe in the hundreds of billions, but definitely tens of billions. Do you think that these companies are going to play nice? Of course not. Of course not. They want guarantee, they want to get their money back, and they want to pump as much oil out of Venezuela as possible. And the only way they can do that is if they can control the government. Now, people would say, that's unfair and blah, blah, blah. This is the real world. People need to pay attention. This is how the real world is. Might is what dictates the rules. The United States is around because we are willing to protect the homeland. But unfortunately, we have individuals within the country that aren't willing to do that. They want a porous border. They want it to erode our currency and lose control of it. But thankfully, we have enough people out there that are willing to defend the nation. All of human history is predicated on this. Just because philosophically it would be better for Venezuela to be a democracy, they internally need to want it. From the United States point of view, why should we care if there's a democracy there? As long as that we can control. If we lose that control because of a dictatorship, and we would be better off with a democracy, then we'll gravitate to a democracy. But if we can't control it, and it's better off with a dictatorship, we'll pick the dictatorship. We are the pragmatic group, picking what is best for us. What's wrong with that? What is wrong with that? So people need to start realizing that this Westphalian concept, the New World Order, rule-based order, right, is slowly eroding and is more moving towards something that is more of an empire, moving more towards what is more important for a particular country. Now, whoever, through luck, through better strategy, better economy, more productive citizens, whatever, smarter, whatever, they'll win. Now, hopefully we win. But there is nothing wrong with what Trump's doing. Nothing. Because that's the rule of nature. Do you think when a lion goes and attacks an elephant that, well, for animal cruelty, that lion is mean? That's the law of the jungle. We got to start thinking like that. Because what has happened in a rule-based order is an erosion of the United States' prowess, economic prowess. Because a rule-based order led to the World Trade Organization, led to opening of markets, that led to the erosion of our economic clusters. Jobs started to diminish. So a rule-based order may not necessarily be in the best interest of the United States. A rule-based order in the UN, half of the UN is antithetical to what the United States wants. Yet the United States pays into the UN an exorbitant amount of money. We pay into the IMF and the World Bank more than most. So let's wake up. Most of the world is against the United States. So we're going to just play patty cake and just, let these dictators and let these, socialists rule? Because you got to remember what happened in Venezuela. What happened in Venezuela was that there was a moment in time where they through socialism, took over property. They took over people's property, companies' property. And now it's a payback. Payback's a bitch. But a lot of people are going to say, well, Trump's a dictator and he's going to not help with democracy. If the Venezuelans want democracy, they're going to have to fight for it. The United States doesn't need to just give it to them. Why would the United States just give them democracy? They need to earn it themselves, because if they don't earn it themselves, they'll never appreciate it. If it's just given to them, it'll just devolve into socialism again. When some sort of market turmoil happens, and then the socialists will come in and start taking the property again and just, take private property and turn it into state property, which is what happened in the energy sector under Chavez. So guess what? Payback's a bitch. I don't see anything wrong with what Trump did. Nothing. Zero when it came to Venezuela. And actually, think about what the Chinese are worried about now. They got a lot of counterparty risk now because the United States is controlling Venezuela. The Chinese were heavily involved in investing in Venezuela. And guess where a lot of that oil was going to? That from Venezuela to China. Now let's fast forward, or let's rewind, I should say. Let's rewind to what was happening during World War II, before the United States became involved in the Asian theater. The United States had an oil embargo on Japan, and Japan was suffering because they needed the oil for their war effort. And what did they do? They miscalculated and they decided to hit Hawaii, Pearl Harbor. Now, it devastated our Navy, but it galvanized the United States to the point where we absolutely, totally destroyed the Japanese Empire. So China, through us taking over their oil supply, is now more at risk on being able to conduct a war effort and take over Taiwan. Now, all these liberals that are saying that Trump is wrong, they're literally not understanding that Trump just moved the first piece of the chessboard between the war between China and the United States. And it starts in Venezuela because of the oil and because of the minerals. That's why it's so damn important. And if it means that Venezuela doesn't have a democracy, so be it. Because a war with the United States and China, we're talking mega deaths here. Millions of deaths, potentially. So people need to wake up. This is not just oil. This is not just democracy for a bunch of yahoos in South America. This is the first piece on the chessboard where the United States is going to kick ass and destroy China.
Activity that has been committed in the U.S. by people affiliated with the gangs, right? If you cut off the head of the snake, does the snake itself wither here? So I think that's a big part of it. And I think we're also setting a precedent for going after cartels in Mexico, where maybe it's not till the end of Q1, Q2, we can talk to Scheinbaum and say, hey, it's time to deal with the Mexican cartels properly. We'll help you or we'll do it ourselves. So I think that's a instrumental part of the overall policy of kind of this domestic freedom is getting rid of the cartels, taking away that power.
That's another thing that needs to be thought about here. The Chinese aren't dumb. They remember about the Opium Wars and how it destroyed their nation. And they're doing Opium Wars 2.0 against the United States. And one of the proxies are Venezuela and Colombia. Don't be surprised that Trump starts going and licking his chops on Colombia. It's only, right next door to Venezuela. And there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it. We finally have a president that's actually saying, enough is enough, we're going to kick your ass.
If we break it, we should fix it. I think we broke it for a reason. If you fix it, we will break it again for a reason. And Trump, even during Trump 1.0, he distinguishes very carefully between military strikes and operations versus war. So in his mind, certainly there is a big difference between doing a strike like we did on the Iranian nuclear facilities or this operation carried out and going to war. And I think that's an important thing. And finally, I think when we all look at deterrence is only really effective if people are scared you will use your capabilities. For too long, we didn't use our capabilities. So I think as a whole,
this guy, he's not getting to the point. The reason why the United States didn't use Navy SEALs and they used Delta Force and Special Forces through the Army is because Delta Force and Special Forces through the Army, not the Navy, they're designed to be able to set up new governments. Navy SEALs don't have that capability. They're not allowed, they aren't trained that way. Special Forces and Army, and especially offshoots of Delta Force, they go in and they actually can help to control the economy and help prop up governments. And they have tons of money and they start paying people off. And that's the reason why Trump is saying, you know what, we're going to be in control. That's a wink, wink, saying our military is already embedded in the government. That's why Navy SEALs didn't do it, because they don't have the capability. We probably have had special forces in Venezuela for months setting this up.
A little bit. So I think that's going to be the key. Is this is really good for production, for security. Companies that are going to be very involved in building up America's resilience are going to do well. The AI story, I think, is a little bit played out.
And just looking at the VIX here, we're back below 15 here, so it's suggesting that the volatility in the equity markets is abating here, and not that ever really spiked on this. This news has been very quiescent. What are the executives at your firm thinking about as it relates to maybe President Trump certainly viewing this as a success so far? Does that mean may replicate it in places like Cuba Colombia, Greenland. I mean, he's mentioned a lot of different scenarios over the past 48 hours.
When we talked a little bit about this going forward, and we kind of collected this weekend, I think people might be most at risk given the size of it, their dependence on Venezuela. And we've got the USS Ford there, which is the aircraft carrier. One, the Caribbean Sea is not an ideal place for an aircraft carrier group to operate in, right? They tend to need much bigger space, much more open waters. So it's already not an ideal place for them to be. That ship is actually due to be docked at some point this year. It needs repairs and things like that. It needs to be an overhaul. So I think there's a use it or lose it sense. So that's why I would put kind of Cuba as potentially the next to feel pressure, maybe Colombia. We've talked a bit about Iran. I think Iran, it's difficult, it's far away, and there's a big religious element that I don't think we want to get involved with in Iran. Maybe we do something with IRGC people there, but I think that's going to be a bit more hands-off. And Greenland, that one, I think that probably causes the most consternation.
Okay, and that's something that we've been grappling with for a while now,
right.
because President Trump has talked about that quite a bit, much to the Danes' consternation.
And can I have one thing on that, too?
Please.
I think I'm willing to believe that in Venezuela, there's rare earths and critical minerals sitting around that have not been properly, looked at, right? Have we taken the advantages? When I look at Greenland, I think enough people have checked out those rare earths and critical minerals. If they could be mined or extracted economically, someone would already be doing that. So I think there's maybe a slightly bigger opportunity with Venezuela because of the underinvestment in that country. I'm really dubious that we can get a whole lot out of Greenland that we couldn't get easier ways or with being less provocative.
You mentioned China and how it responds to the cutting off of Venezuelan oil to that country. What about how it moves forward with Taiwan? Because there's a lot of concern that this gives Beijing the pretext it needs to go forward and remove Taiwan's leadership.
I think first they're going to try and protect their interest in, Venezuela, not just the oil they're getting, but the investment their companies have made, right? I believe they called in their banks to figure out what their credit exposure is. So China has a lot economically riding on this. They also do not want to lose precedent over their Belt and Road Initiative globally, right? If it becomes easy to walk away or for the U.S. to step in and kick out China, that reduces their power globally. So I think they're going to do a lot of focus on this. They apparently have this army of lawyers, the Iron Army they've been calling it, and a lot of very Western trained. So we will see them, I think, ramp up and try and do a lot there. I think in Taiwan, they're not going to be reactive. We don't think they're prepared to attack Taiwan. On the other hand, I think you will see more gray zone operations, so cyber interdiction within Taiwan, maybe even using the maritime militia to kind of disrupt trade briefly, not horribly disrupted, but just to signal their flex. And I think they're going to keep this ongoing push. But I would say long term, there is a concern that we are clearly heading towards a North and South America and leaving the rest of the world. So when I look at emerging markets investments, we're very careful. Like, I want to own Central and South America. I do not necessarily want to own Asia. I think we have far more control, and we've been advising all the corporations we work with. If you do not have production in South America, all your production's in Asia, you should be really considering your next plant should go into South America, because the lines of sight, our ability to control those shipping lanes is so much better than in Asia.
See, I guess just one of the many questions to be asked and answered over the coming days in Venezuela is
they're trying to hedge their bet. They're trying to hedge their bet because if China really starts to ramp up their war effort in the Pacific, the 9-dash line is going to be cut off and the freedom of navigation is going to be a problem. Now, the question is will the United States military kick ass, take control, and prevent China from expanding to the first island chains and the second island chains? You have to remember, Hawaii is not 5 islands. Hawaii is 137 islands. Little islands, but a lot of them. So China, if they have a blue water navy, guess what? They're going to chip away at actually the state of Hawaii. So people need to fucking wake up.
We'll continue to go after those people who cause problems, particularly on the drug trafficking side, to eradicate that threat to the U.S.
Also worth mentioning that Delcy Rodriguez, the new president, former vice president, is a former oil minister. So she has experience with the state oil producer, also with working with international firms as well. She's a known quantity.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see how that plays out in the coming days. Peter, thank you very much. Really appreciate getting your unique perspective of your firm. The research notes, reach out to Academy Securities if you want to see the works. Again, has a unique viewpoint coming from the background of the folks at Academy Securities. Peter, your head of macro strategy at Academy Securities. With our news, let's go to Bloomberg Business Flash. John Tucker.
All right, stocks pushing high, Paul and Scarlett. Dow Jones Industrial Average has in fact crossed into record territory. The Dow up 638 points, up 1.3%. We're at 18 right now. Valero Energy, Halliburton, the oil services company, leaders in the S&P 500. Halliburton right now up close to 10%. Kind of a rough year for American factories. On the data front, manufacturing activity shrinking in December by the most since 2024. This is the ISM index edging down to 47.9. Remember, anything below 50 is contraction. Meantime, Jane Foley of Rabobank expects investors to quickly shift away from geopolitics back to interest rate policy.
A lot of jobs data out from the US this week, ended, of course, with the payrolls report, and that I think is going to focus the market's attention back on the Fed.
Right now, the S&P 500 51 points higher. That's up just about 0.75%, 6909 on the index. The Nasdaq 100 up 277 points. That's a rise of 1.1% right now. The Fiserv Small Business Index for December shows small businesses closed out the holiday season with just modest gains. Consumers were more focused, this is important, on essentials rather than discretionary spending for small businesses. Surprisingly enough, for the entire year, sporting goods led the annual gains.
It's all about wellness.
I guess so. My big gift, this is a game changer in my house, an air fryer.
Ooh.
Love it.
Really?
I don't use the stove anymore. So
No more stove, no more microwave. It's all in the air
this
fryer.
is like perfect. So I don't know.
You learn something new.
You know,
It's a great way
there
to
you
heat up
go.
pizza.
I highly recommend it. We check the markets for you all day long, right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that's your Bloomberg Business Flash, Scarlett Paul.
All right, good stuff. Thank you so much, John Tucker. This is Bloomberg Intelligence. Happy New Year, everyone, with Paul Sweeney and Scarlett Fu. And of course, we are reckoning with the markets right now. You have stocks higher, you have safe havens, sorry, that's redundant, havens like the dollar, bonds, gold higher as well. You also have oil higher after the U.S. struck Venezuela and ousted Nicolas Maduro as president. Let's bring in Mike McGlone. He's our senior commodity strategist at Bloomberg Intelligence. And Mike, I want to start with oil because the goal here, as President Trump has put it, is to allow U.S. big oil companies to come in and rebuild Venezuela's crumbling oil infrastructure. That should be good for the supply of oil to the United States. But we're looking at oil prices rising at a time when there is plenty of oil out there, and some would even call it a glut. Give us a state of play here on supply and demand.
I think it's a knee-jerk reaction, Scarlett. You also notice almost everything is up today. It's the first real business week of the new year. One significance is the most significant performing commodity there is natural gas, and it's down about 5%. But oil's bouncing. Remember, $58 a barrel right now was first traded in about 2005. It's almost 20 years ago. The key thing is the trend is downward. North America is becoming the supply maker. Now that we have more supply potential coming out from South America, it's going to be much more and more the supply maker or the price maker, no longer a price taker. So the big picture is very still bearish for crude oil. Question is, I think most traders are looking for a little bit of a range trade. Maybe if we can pop to near 65, they'll sell to be able to bring on more supply. If we drop to near maybe 45, they'll buy. But right now, that looks like the kind of the range for there we should look for between 45 and 65. But right now, we're 58.
Precious metals, Mike, they seem to have just picked up right where they kind of.
I don't think it's 45. I think it's 55. All right, 45. That means that you're going to have to be you're turning off the spigot, and the oil producers are going to be hurting because it's getting close to or below their break even. So I think that they'll cut the spigot before it hits 50. So 45 seems a little. I can't stay in the 4 handle, the 40 handle, for that long. If it does, it'd be in there for a very short time. And then, now in terms of traders, all right, in terms of traders, I would agree with him that, okay, 45 would be a great buy. Totally agree with that. But the thing is I don't think he'll get down to 45 because the oil producers need to make money. They can't make money at 50. They need to make money at, some of the oil producers can't make money at 55. Some of them can't even make money at 60. So there's different tiers. The 60 break even, the 55 break even, and the 50 break even. So it can't stay below 50 for very long. So this is the reason why I think the real trading range a more realistic trading range is about 55 to about 65.
How does copper fare in this new world order?
Supply disruptions and tariffs, Scarlett, you nailed it, were the number one reasons for copper to go up last year, but typically those aren't enduring. So I'd like to point out that the Bloomberg Industrial Metals Index was up about the same 22% as the Bloomberg measure of total world stock market cap. It went up 22% to $151 trillion. See the connection there? Industrial metals will be fine as long as the stock market keeps going up. And to me, that's the risk. It's already priced in. And the risk is maybe it goes down a little. And the indications we're seeing from that is gold grabbing alpha and things like the tip of the iceberg, cryptocurrencies in Bitcoin tilting lower at the end of last year.
Tom from the Upper East Side writes in and he wants me to ask you about Bitcoin. Up almost 3% today, back to 94,000 handle. Is that in response at all to Venezuela, or is that just kind of putting some risk back on?
I think it's part of all the above. It is the beginning of the year, the first big week, risk back on. But I think the thing is last year marked a paradigm shift in cryptos, the shift over by the Trump administration, massive pump, and now the dump. To me, it's a worthy short this year because it's the tip of the risk asset iceberg. And so I think this is a near-term bounce. But for now, Bitcoin's going to run into really good resistance between 94,000 and 100,000. It has to stay above that. I think it's a greater risk of going down next year or this year, particularly if the U.S. stock market goes down. So the bottom line is, for these highly volatile crypto risk, and
there's a Fibonacci resistance level at around 95, if I remember right, based on the video that I did just recently. So 95,000 for Bitcoin resistance level. It's trading at 94,425. We'll see right now. It's getting close to that 61% retracement. So it's probably going to bounce around, and then you're probably going to have some shorts there, and they're going to try to drive down Bitcoin. But, there's not that many buyers after 100,000. How many buyers are there? So it's a bunch of whales. And this is the reason why I got out of Bitcoin, is I feel it's a manipulated market. There's too many whales affecting the market.
Most notably Bitcoin. But the key thing to remember, Scarlett, is there's an unlimited supply of cryptos, and there's a limited supply of precious metals. Only 4, but 28 million cryptos. So I think that crypto market's peaked, and people are realizing that anything with an unlimited supply and unlimited competition is probably not good for prices to sustain higher over time.
Yep. Anything of interest in the ag sector there, Mike?
Yeah, well, this time last year, Paul, corn put in a new high. Open interest jumped up to the highest ever. Remember, corn's been trading for 100 years. People were really optimistic. It got to near 5, and then it dropped down to like $3.75. Right now, it's back above 4. So it's the optimism at the beginning of the year. Be very careful with. So the ags are more in a downward trajectory, like energy, crude oil, natural gas. And I think that's going to continue to get to that low price cure. I just don't think we've reached that low price cure yet. The bottom line is, we have deflation in ags, deflation in energy. If we get a little deflation in the stock market, that's a big pressure on things like inflation and bond yields.
All right, good stuff. Really appreciate your joining us. Mike McGlone, of course, he's our senior commodity strategist at Bloomberg Intelligence, joining us from Miami. And he brings up a good point, Paul, which is if you want to look at oil prices in particular, everything is green on the screen right now.
Yep.
You're looking at equities all up across the board, with the Russell 2000 actually one of the better performers, along with the Dow, up by more than 1.3%. Treasuries are higher, the dollar's higher, oil's higher, coal's higher, silver.
I still think that 7,000 is a major resistance level for the S&P 500. We're at 6,900 right now, so just pay attention. We're about 100 points, about 90 points away from the major resistance level. All right, let's listen into CNBC about Venezuela's president in U.S. custody. What's Kramer's take on this?
Some more regarding the commodity and Venezuela with Brian Sullivan this morning at HQ, with a look at what some of the oil majors are saying, or maybe more importantly, Brian, not saying about their future.
What they're not saying, Carl, is that they're going to be going into Venezuela anytime soon. Spent the weekend talking to pretty much every oil company out there, industry sources, government officials, even members of OPEC. Here's the reality. A lot of the oil complex, which you guys have shown so well, is indeed on the move. You look at a Valero, that's higher, Schlumberger, Halliburton, Baker Hughes, Chevron, Phillips 66, all those stocks are indeed moving higher, but I want to be very, very clear in my reporting over the weekend. This is a country that is still, I don't want to say leaderless, but it's unclear effectively. Delcy Rodriguez currently in charge. What will happen? This is a country whose oil infrastructure is largely rusted and has come way, way down. This is not a situation where suddenly tomorrow you're going to have an Exxon or a ConocoPhillips or somebody else say, guys, we've decided now with the president's urging that we are going to be going into Venezuela. That is simply not going to happen. Obviously, Chevron is there as a joint venture with PDVSA right now. Venezuela putting out about 800 to 900,000 barrels a day. Folks, that's about 0.8% of global oil output. And the other thing I would add is that OPEC is, Venezuela is a founding member of OPEC. OPEC has quotas on certain nations. Venezuela not in that group of 8, so to speak, that is kind of doing things on their own. They had a meeting yesterday, Sunday, they're meeting about oil output and quotas. But Venezuela, as a founding member of OPEC, is subject to what they call their declaration of cooperation, where they kind of set their output goals. I'm not trying to throw cold water on the Venezuela story. What I am trying to report, what I am reporting, I should say, is that this concept going around that suddenly Exxon is going to show up or ConocoPhillips is going to show up in Venezuela tomorrow is simply not true. David Faber, you know very well, Guyana, Exxon is very much involved in that offshore platform, billions of dollars of investment. We're talking about a country that would require, if not a decade, close to it, tens of billions of dollars of investment. And if it does begin, it will begin with the Schlumberger's, the Halliburton.
Right, exactly. That's what I was going to say. It's the big ones to focus on. If you want to be like, early adapter to this, what's happening, and if things stabilize, Schlumberger and Halliburton, they're going to benefit big time on this.
Uses of the world, because to build out any extra oil output, you first need to modernize and invest in the guts, the infrastructure of oil, and that are the services names. That is why they are up very quickly, why Valero's up, because the Venezuelan oil is very thick, it is very sludgy. If indeed there is some kind of increase in output, that oil would likely be shipped to America and refined by, likely, a Valero, which has the capability to refine the heavier crude that would ultimately be turned into diesel.
Right. It used to go apparently to Aruba. There was the largest refinery in the world on Aruba. It doesn't operate anymore for that Venezuelan oil, as you point out, back when obviously the Chevrons and the others were operating in the country at a fuller level. I mean, to your point, Ryan, and your reporting here, obviously speaking to a lot of people, I mentioned a conversation I had with somebody who was in the country not long ago. The state of disrepair is appalling. The pipelines, the pumping stations, the power, all of it needing to be rebuilt. And the question they ask, and the one I know you're raising as well, is how are you going to do that without some sort of massive security guarantee from the U.S.? And what does that really look like, especially if you get a change of administration in 2028 that has a different approach?
That's exactly right. And people I talked to also over the weekend, David, said if this was going to happen, if this was purely an oil play, why would this capture, if you will, of Maduro not occurred in 2019 in the first Trump term when the oil infrastructure was less bad, when output was higher? Remember, former President Joe Biden put a $25 million bounty on Maduro's head earlier in 2025 before he left office. So we've been talking about removing Maduro or having Maduro leave or whatever terminology you want to use for a number of years. Why now? This is not some immediate oil play. The oil company stocks are popping on this idea, maybe that, to your point, you will get this investment at the early stages to try to modernize it. Two big questions: who pays for it? And that security guarantee, David, that you talked about. If you're going to bring down a couple hundred or a couple thousand American or Western nation workers to go down and improve this, you better darn well make sure that they are safe, they have housing. And Venezuela right now, and probably for months or years to come, is not a nation that anybody is going to describe as stable.
Yeah, a lot of parallels to Iraq, where you had a lot of party loyalists. You got to pay them or fight them somehow to make sure that your investments can take place. Brian, we'll talk soon. Brian Sullivan, thanks.
You do not need to be liked by everybody. You need to choose your friends and your enemies carefully.
Let's listen in. China is complaining about Venezuela at the UN. Another example of how the UN is incompetent.
Supports the government and people of Venezuela in safeguarding their sovereignty, security, and legitimate rights and interests. We firmly support the regional countries in upholding the status of Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace. We demand that the United States change its course, cease its bullying and coercive practices, and develop relations and cooperation with regional countries on the basis of mutual respect, equality, and non-interference in international affairs. China stands ready to work with the regional countries and the international community to strengthen solidarity and cooperation, uphold fairness and justice, and jointly safeguard peace and stability in Latin America and the Caribbean. I thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for the statement, and now give the floor to the representative of Liberia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the A3 members, namely the Democratic Republic of Congo, Somalia, and my own country, Liberia. We thank the presidency for promptly convening this important meeting. We congratulate Somalia on assuming the presidency of the Security Council this month and warmly welcome all new members. The A3 appreciates USG DiCarlo's comprehensive briefing and listened carefully to the remarks offered by civil society representatives. We also welcome the representative of Venezuela and the representatives of the region to this meeting. Mr. President, the A3 aligns itself with the recent communique of the African Union on the situation in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and continues to monitor developments there with deep concerns. In particular, we note reports regarding the detention of President Nicolas Maduro and his wife and incidents involving Venezuelan institutions. Such developments present serious challenges not only to Venezuela's internal stability, but also underscore the imperative to safeguard the broader peace and security of the region. The A3 remains steadfast in its commitment to the fundamental principles of international law, including the full respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states as enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations in the interest of regional stability and international peace. We believe these are essential foundations for international cooperation and peaceful coexistence. Our position.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotic and the multivitamin. The multivitamin is easy to digest, and it has the multivitamins that you need for proper enzymatic activity, so your cells perform properly, and therefore your tissues perform properly. And get the probiotic. The probiotic will help with your gut biome, allow for better nutrient absorption, improve your immune system at the gut level, bring down inflammation, help with your skin health, rev up your metabolism, and also improve your brain function. A lot of people don't realize that good gut health actually affects your brain function. You'll be able to sleep better. You'll be able to detoxify your central nervous system. You'll be able to consolidate memory, and you'll be well rested. So please go to my store, get the probiotics and also get the multivitamin. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. It's all caps, discount 5. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. All right, China asked banks to report exposure to Venezuela after U.S. raid. And this is in conjunction with major requests for the last few trading sessions where some banks or someone that has access to the discount window went to the Federal Reserve and asked for lots of money in the tune of, like, at different points in time, if you add them all up, over $100 billion. Now, this doesn't normally happen. So there's some sort of counterparty issue and liquidity issue that's happening in the banking industry. Now, I'm not seeing a elevated interest rate for SOFR, which is a interbank lending rate. That's relatively stable. So what's really going on? Now, so far, actually, its rate is going down because they feel as though the Federal Reserve will lower rates. Okay, that makes sense. But there's some sort of liquidity issue out there because you wouldn't have individuals accessing the discount window from the Federal Reserve unless there was some major issue at the tune of $100 billion. Okay. So we probably have American banks that have some exposure to Venezuela. We probably have also American banks tied to some sort of counterparty risk with China. So something is stirring here, all right? So pay attention. This is a data point that we can apply to see that if there is some sort of contagion, that there may be a little bit of a reduced momentum, and the stock price for the S&P 500 may actually start to drift down. Right? Just depends on, like, what is the risk here? Now, China has been playing in our backyard for a while, so they definitely have some sort of problem. And a lot of that oil that was coming from Venezuela was going to China. So let's listen into Bloomberg here, this segment about the bank's exposure to Venezuela. Because you got to remember, China's economy isn't doing so well. So this is another, like, bleed point for their economy.
Crude oil, narco-terrorism, Trindagua, or the cartel of the suns, Tom. This is about China. This is about geopolitics. This is about China buying discounted barrels from Venezuela in RMB, which they've been doing for however many years. And if you notice, just this morning, Beijing called in all the Chinese banks saying we need to review your credit exposure to Venezuela because this is not going, it's going south in a hurry. So I think this is about signaling. I think this is, but look, in the same breath, this gives all the fuel you need to the dollar bears here because people are going to draw parallels between Ukraine, between Taiwan. This gives a green light for China to kind of move in on, you saw all the stuff online over the weekend with people heated, talking about, this is the green light for us to invade Frog Island, which is a derogatory way of referring to Taiwan. But look, I mean, the interesting thing for me this time around is you don't hear anything about Edmundo Gonzalez, the former ambassador to Argentina who ran for president, Maria Corina Machado, the Nobel Peace Prize winning, Venezuelan, or Juan Guaido. I mean, this is about, keeping the existing regime in place. And again, it's a sort of a novel concept. I haven't really given it much thought. I haven't really seen anything like this before.
So the big take story on
and if you're Delta Force, if you're Special Forces Army, and you are trying to control the situation economically, politically, is it easier to handle a current regime? Or is it easier to have new elections with some sort of democracy kind of? No. In the short run, putting the U.S. thumb on the current government, what's left of the current government, would be easier for the special forces. There's no doubt in my mind that Special Forces is running the show over there. They're 100% positive about that. So if you are Special Forces that's trained to be able to manipulate markets and to stabilize governments, to set up coups if you need to, all right? You're working in conjunction with the CIA. Is it easier to just work with that's already established in terms of the government, or to set something totally new and have democracy flourish in Venezuela? In the short term, it makes more sense to just put your thumb on the current existing whatever's left of the government. If they don't play ball, then you get rid of them.
Today, Trump's ousting of Maduro shows his new world order is here. What does an EM investor take from that? Is that a net positive, a net negative, just uncertainty? I don't know.
There's a lot of
uncertainty. Near term, you have to kind of look at what this means for, again, the dollar, right? And I think it does give fuel to the dollar decline, which is inherently good for emerging markets. And no region has higher yields than Latin America. So you saw Mexico, Brazil, and Colombia all coming out against the recent actions. Yet they're the three highest yielding economies in emerging markets. And, I do believe that if you're a trader or an investor and you have to kind of remain an unbiased, unfiltered opinion, you're probably going to look to those economies for carry. So
for the ones that are watching the dashboard, pay attention to the Bitcoin BTC on the dashboard, and you can see the 61% retracement and how it's bouncing off of it. This is the point that I'm making. That 61% retracement is a resistance level. All right. Now, I don't know, maybe it doesn't hold intraday, but 95K for Bitcoin is a resistance level. So pay attention. You can see it in real time and how it's trading in the intraday. It bounced right off of it. Now, it might break, but just pay attention. I mean, you can see it in real time on the chart.
I'm pretty constructive on those markets here in the early going. But, you're right. What does this mean for, think about it, Brazil, Guyana, the cost to develop their offshore drilling is, roughly 75. It's much more expensive than going into Venezuela. So I don't care about all the $100 billion it's going to cost to get, Venezuelan barrels back online. It's still 25% cheaper than, doing offshore in Guyana and Brazil. So that might fundamentally be weaker for Petrobras and Ecopet and some of those.
Let me ask our listeners and viewers, who writes a check for those hundreds of billions of dollars over the next 5 years?
Tom, $100 billion in Venezuela oil revenue was stolen by government officials from 1972 to 1997. That 25-year period, $100 billion is sitting offshore somewhere, Credit Suisse knows. And, I'm not suggesting that I'm absolutely serious about this, Tom. This is nothing new. There is a lot of stolen oil wealth that is sitting offshore. And I'm not at all suggesting that the U.S. is going to go after that next. But, this is really what we're after. And there's a huge the 8 million migrants, many of whom are located here in the U.S. The Venezuelan diaspora is cheering this on. And I do believe that, look, regardless of how Brazil, Mexico, and Colombia, look at this over the next few months, Colombia's got a big election coming up in May. Brazil's got a big election coming up at the end of this year. The pivot to the right is on. And so I got to believe, you're going to see the biggest contests to the current administrations coming from pro-U.S., pro what's going on in Venezuela parties. And that's what we're going to get a ruling on here.
Paul, jump in here, but can I ask, have you been to Caracas? I mean, you look like Brad Pitt.
I was in Buenos Aires and Rio de Janeiro over the break. So I was boots on the ground in Brazil. I was boots on the ground in Argentina. Constructive, bullish. Those economies seem to be bouncing pretty nicely here. And I can tell you some stories about what I really witnessed offline, but I don't think our audience is ready for it.
So, what is it feeling as you talk to your clients today, next couple of days? Are they going to be more bullish on LATAM or less so, or taking a wait and see?
Well, I think, you want to see where these Veni bonds come in. People are calling for 60 cents on the dollar. I mean, these bonds in early 2023 were trading at pennies on the dollar. I'm talking 5 cents on the dollar. They're 40, 45 cents now, and growing. So, you've had some really big gains along the lines. But look, if you're investing in the future of Venezuela, you're a long-term investor, you're going to want, if you're a current creditor who's in default holding these bonds, you're going to want to see, a restructuring that links your interest to the equity upside that Venezuela offers, because this is a resource-rich country with mining interests, rare earths, they've got oil coming out here. We all know the numbers. So, tourism, coastline, the whole smash. So, GDP warrants, structures like that, I think are going to find their way into the vocabulary.
It's possible that the banks that accessed the discount window, they were concerned about some sort of liquidity risk because of Venezuela. They probably were, given a heads up, maybe something might happen, and they wanted to be prepared for a shock. That could have been, but the whole discount window signal that I saw was because of Venezuela operation. If it continues, if there's a group of banks or a bank that keeps on accessing that window, that repo window, then there is something that's starting to brew. It wasn't just a shock absorber to, absorb some sort of negative externality from the operation that took place. If they keep on accessing the window post the event, then there's something bigger happening. So we have to see what happens today and tomorrow in the discount window at the Federal Reserve to know if all things are clear or this is starting to some sort of potential liquidity risk is starting to emerge.
Question is going to turn to Damien Cesar, Bloomberg Business Sports. How do the major banks get involved? Does the president dial 1-800-Moynihan, 1-800-Diamond? What do you see as a process out of the 90s where we all go Bill Rhodes, LatAm?
No, I don't know if it's going to be that quick or that. I don't think, look, I think you need to restructure $60 billion worth of bonds before anything happens. And by the way, Venezuela's borrowed a lot of money from China now.
It's the bond market, the Venezuelan bond market.
They have a lot of money to the Iranians. So there's a lot of other, kind of liens on those assets that are, it's going to be very complicated. And so, for me, I want to see how that kind of all materializes, what the talks talk about. But first, it's about an election. It's about, regime change, if there is such a thing there, because right now it doesn't look like it. So again, we're in uncharted waters here.
I have a feeling it has something to do with the bond market.
For leukemia.
I think I have a feeling that window had something to do with the bond market. All right, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Max 35. Max 35 is 35 parts per million. Cleanse is 30 parts per million. They're at different price points, but you take them the same way. Take a teaspoon a day, swish it in your mouth, gargle about 20 seconds, and then swallow it. What this will do is boost up your immune system. It'll improve the health of your oral cavity and your oral pharynx, maintain your mucosal barrier, and help the health of your epithelial cells. This is super important for your innate immune system. This will help to boost it up and help to neutralize. Take it every day. If you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well, take a tablespoon or two a day prophylactically. All right? But once you get through the event, then you go back to your maintenance dose of a teaspoon a day. I've been doing this protocol for over 5 years, so please go to my store, get the Max 35 or the Cleanse, take it every day. And again, like I said, you want to boost up that immune system. And another great product that I have that's really important to take, especially for the winter season, is the vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 is dual purpose. It's going to help to absorb calcium. You do resistance training, you're going to get better bone density. Super important. You don't want brittle bones. You don't want osteopenia. You don't want osteoporosis, right? Now, vitamin D3 also helps with gene expression. It's a gene expression cofactor, so your cells perform properly. If your cells are infected, vitamin D3 will help to get the cells to go into apoptosis to clear it. That's why it's so important to take vitamin D3 in the winter season. Now, vitamin D3 also will help with your cardiovascular health. It'll help to reduce calcium depositing, especially if you stack it with K2, MK7. So please go to my store, get the vitamin D3, take it every day, but especially during the winter season, super important. And if you've been paying attention to the news, something's going around, right? So you want to be prepared. Please go to my store, use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. Let's listen into Bloomberg.
Margarita Island, allegedly, and using a state oil company plane in order to bring drugs to places including the United States. The noon hearing before Judge Hallerstein is going to be well attended. They have several overflow courtrooms in this courthouse because of the attention here, and we're not expecting that there will be bail in this case. But the case, if it goes to trial, that trial won't happen until 2027.
So between now and trial day, do we know where Mr. Maduro and his wife will be detained?
Yeah, between now and trial, they'll be at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, a notorious and the only federal jail here in New York City. It is a facility where they'll be separated. She'll be in the women's wing. He'll be in the men's wing. They get 3 meals a day. Those meals in the past have had issues, those issues including being rotten food. They've had a rodent issue at that jail. There was a time where there was no heat or hot water in that jail back in 2019. A number of the folks who were held there went on a hunger strike. And, you know, he won't be the only high-profile person detained there. Luigi Mangione is also there. It also held El Chapo in the past, Ghislaine Maxwell in the past as well. It is not a good place to be. And in fact, in some cases, it is worse than some of the worst prisons that are in Venezuela, we've been told.
Yeah, that's quite the lineup. Very quickly, Miles, you had mentioned in the last hour that there are some protests taking place as well. Just walk us through what's happening.
Yeah, there are protests on both sides. On the one hand are people who fled Venezuela and who are seeking temporary protective status, who are out here, who do not agree with, or who are supportive of him being brought here and being brought to justice because they fled the regime. And then there are others who do not agree with him being brought here, who are supportive of him, and there are some signs here that say that he should be released. He should be released back to his country. And it's interesting, you can find both sides of those divides here. You know, I was doing research for the story I wrote last night, and in it, you know, there was a Venezuelan restaurant 10 to 15 minutes away from that very place where he'll be held at MDC in Sunset Park.
Miles Miller, thank you so much. Bloomberg News senior reporter joining us.
Tired of cooking for one? Watch this. 3 reasons why these chefs will change your life. 1. Cook Unity features over 80 celebrated chefs crafting.
Yesterday, New York City's new mayor, Zohran Mamdani, revealed he called President Trump to blast him for arresting Nicolas Maduro.
I called the president and spoke with him directly to register my opposition to this act and to make clear that it was an opposition based on being opposed to a pursuit of regime change, to the violation of federal and international law, and a desire to see that be consistent each and every day.
And today, Mamdani is refusing to stand down from his comments. He even dodged a question about using the city's resources to interfere with Maduro's prosecution.
Have you spoken to Trump again about Maduro or what's happening in Venezuela?
No, the conversation that we had was the one before yesterday's press conference.
You said it was a violation of federal and international law. Do you plan to use any of the city's resources to interfere with the prosecution or anything like that?
This is a federal action on a federal timeline, and I owe it to New Yorkers to deliver for them across the 5 boroughs and also to be honest and straightforward about my own thoughts on this.
Joining us now is New York Congressman Mike Lawler, a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. It doesn't sound like the mayor actually really answered that question, but nonetheless, it is amazing to me that Donald Trump will actually take that call. One of the most open and transparent presidents we've had. But Mamdani said he got a briefing before he called the president. Who would brief him, and how can you imagine this would actually go down?
I guess he read his X feed. I don't really know who would have given him a briefing, but and certainly not before members of Congress. But as far as his comments go, I mean, this is the same person who said that he would arrest Benjamin Netanyahu in New York City. And so he's talking about things, frankly, that he has no knowledge of, no understanding of. And the fact is, Maduro was justly arrested. This is similar to what President Bush did in 1989 with Noriega in Panama. And the fact is that Maduro has been indicted 3 times in U.S. courts. He has flouted that. And the bottom line is he needs to be held accountable for his crimes and the illicit drug trade that has resulted in the deaths of tens of thousands of Americans over many years. And you look at what he has done with the illicit oil trade with Iran. That's why our military ships are there. That is why they have been seizing control of these sanctioned ships that have been involved in this illicit oil trade. And so there is a lot here, not the least of which, of course, is the 8 million people who have fled Venezuela, many of them coming into the United States, into New York. And by the way, those people are celebrating Maduro's arrest. And meanwhile, you have Democrats, protesting in the streets, demanding that Maduro be released, and President Trump, somehow be held criminally liable for this. I mean, it's just craziness.
Congressman Waller, I think you hit on a lot of very interesting points, particularly when we look at the leadership here in New York City and really across the state as well. New York Governor Kathy Hochul also condemning these strikes, and she was also brief, she says. She talks about the Venezuelan community standing with families abroad in hopes, but she says there are no credible threats to New York at this time, that state police are coordinating with our partners in law enforcement to monitor the situation and keep New Yorkers safe. Mayor Mamdani talked about his focus being the safety of every New Yorker, that his administration will monitor the situation and issue relevant guidance. Do you view that as they're looking at this as something that there's some sort of threat to be wary of in the wake of this arrest?
I guess. I guess they're alleging that potentially because of the arrest of Maduro that there could be an attack in New York. I mean, what's fascinating to me about their statements is they had no qualms about Venezuelan drug cartels or gang members coming into the United States under Joe Biden's open borders, and in fact openly embraced them coming into New York City. Now, of course, they're outraged. Then you look at their overall comments. They talk about protecting democracy and how important that is. Meanwhile, you have somebody who was illegitimately elected in Venezuela, in Maduro, and Joe Biden put a $25 million bounty on his head and said, we do not recognize him as the legitimate president. The EU does not recognize him. Over 60 countries do not recognize him. And yet now we have Democrats saying that he should be released, that he never should have been removed. It's just laughable the lengths by which they go and say things that are contrary to what their previous statements were. And it's all because it's Donald Trump who did it. And that's what's so infuriating about this. You have a situation where somebody who has been involved in this illicit drug trade, this illicit oil trade, who has been basically serving as a narco-terror state, and these folks would rather attack President Trump for making a righteous decision, a difficult decision, but the right one. because it's Donald Trump. And that's what's fundamentally wrong here. Josh Gottheimer, a Democrat from New Jersey, was the only colleague of mine that I saw that put out a sensible, reasonable statement on the arrest. You have Kamala Harris saying that it's illegal. I mean, God help us if she was president of the United States dealing with these issues.
No kidding, Congressman. You know, the No Kings people are doing some incredible mental gymnastics right now. I remember when they were out in the streets declaring No Kings, now defending a narco-terrorist dictator. It's really something to behold. But Mamdani, of course, isn't the only Democrat slamming President Trump for his operations in Venezuela. We've got House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries claiming Venezuela might actually be worse off with Trump in charge. Watch this.
It remains to be seen whether the people of Venezuela are going to be better off. Donald Trump claims that he's going to run Venezuela. He's done a terrible job running the United States of America. Life hasn't gotten better for the American people over the last year. Life has gotten worse. He promised to lower the high cost of living. Costs haven't gone down. They've gone up. The healthcare system is broken. Donald Trump refuses to do anything about it to address the Republican healthcare crisis. So the notion that he's going to run Venezuela and make life better for the Venezuelan people, of course, is belied by the facts as to what he's done as president here in the United States of America.
Congressman, really interesting because the Venezuelan people seem to be pretty excited about the possibility of freedom in their country. But what do you make of Hakeem Jeffries there and his assessment?
I don't even know if they hear themselves talk half the time with the stupid things that come out of their mouths. I mean, I'm sorry. Nicolas Maduro was a despot, a dictator, a brutal murderer, a Marxist who has run his country into the ground. Poverty rates have skyrocketed. You want to talk about healthcare. You want to talk about food insecurity. This is a man who is sitting on oil, who's sitting on minerals, and has destroyed his economy. And they're criticizing President Trump. Look, when you look at Joe Biden's economy versus President Trump's economy, it's night and day. The fact is the economy is growing. We have job creation. Costs are coming down. We delivered the largest tax cut in American history that when people go to file their taxes this April, they will see significant reduction in their tax burden because of what we have done. The economy is booming. And this year, it is going to really prove fruitful with the policies that we've enacted. Yes, there are issues to deal with, like healthcare. But by the way, that is because of Obamacare. Because Obamacare has failed to actually reduce healthcare costs. That's their policy. That is their chief policy that they put in place that they said would reduce healthcare costs in America. They have skyrocketed over 15 years by 96%. Meanwhile, insurance company profits are up 2,000% because Obamacare was written by the insurance companies for the insurance companies. But Democrats never seem to want to be honest about how to deal with these problems. They just want to point the finger, blame President Trump, and kick and scream. The fact is, what President Trump did, both with Iran going after their nuclear program, and yesterday taking out Nicolas Maduro, arresting him, and bringing him back to the U.S. for prosecution, are two consequential decisions that will make the world safer, that have undercut the alliance between Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, Venezuela, these states that have sought to undermine and destabilize the U.S., Europe, Israel, and the free world. And yet, here today, you have Democrats aligning themselves with the leaders of these countries because they hate President Trump so much. It is disturbing, truly, to listen to them talk about these issues.
Congressman, Venezuela has been Maduro-less for about 36 hours now. How concerned are you about potential instability there?
Look, I think obviously anytime you have a destructive force like Maduro removed.
Breaking news. Breaking news. Governor Walz not seeking re-election.
In the wake, it can create some level of instability. His chief henchmen are still in place. I think the administration's posture is correct, which is to say, look, these are the terms. you start making these necessary changes and transition to an election. I mean, ultimately, there's going to need to be an election there, and we're going to have a democratically elected government put in place.
Congressman Michael Lawler, really do appreciate you joining us tonight. Do appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.
We're Phoenix Energy, a family-owned oil company focused on unleashing American oil from North Dakota and Montana. We've already sold over
The timeline is very, very long. The timeline includes not just what must be done on the oil patch, but also includes how do you get this government to cooperate with the United States. And yes, it's starting out on a good foot, but this can't be done without a change in the entire view of the government of how they do what they do. They're there to make money. They're there to control things. And they can't do that and have the oil patch to resume what it was like 25 years ago.
This is a transactional president. You have lived with your iconic work at Citigroup, a transaction.
Before we continue on with the story of oil in Venezuela, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the digestive enzyme complex. This is a great supplement to take because what this will do is help to break up carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids and reduce the load on your pancreas. When you get older, your pancreas doesn't function as well, no matter how healthy you are. It's really important to take the digestive enzyme complex. In addition, this has bromelain in it. This will help to break up clots, and it has the proteolytic enzymes to break up glycoproteins. Really important, especially during the winter season. So take the digestive enzyme complex and help digest your food, and you'll be able to reduce the stress on your digestive system. Super important. If you're an athlete, this will also help you to break up your pre or post-workout fuel source. So for people that are older, 40 years of age or older, you need to reduce the stress on your digestive system. But if you're younger and you're an athlete, you'll benefit from taking digestive enzyme complex. Now, olive leaf extract, dual purpose. This is going to help to bring down inflammation and control your lipid profile, help to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels. When you do that, you're reducing plaque formation, so you're improving your cardiovascular health. Better blood flow also helps brain, because better blood flow to the brain will give the micronutrients to have robust and healthy neurons and neural connections. And olive leaf extract brings down inflammation. That will help to boost up the immune system, and bringing down inflammation at the vascular level reduces plaque formation. Bringing down inflammation at the cerebral level helps to protect your neurons. So this is a very important supplement to take. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And also the deodorants, male or for female. You can get it in citrus and peppermint, lavender, and tea tree. Citrus and peppermint, lavender, and tea tree. It's made from essential oils from the Himalayas, very high quality. It's dual purpose. You use it as a daily deodorant, but it'll help to detoxify your body. And when you do that, you're improving your immune system and your endocrine system. It's a very high quality deodorant. Please go to my store and get it. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. You spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video.
Big American banks enjoying losing big money in Latin America and other places. What do you perceive as a relationship of President Trump with Mr. Diamond, with Mr. Moynihan, and with other financiers of America?
Well, he's got a good relationship with the financial sector for all kinds of good reasons that we can get into. That's a separate subject. But here, the capital has to come from oil companies. And oil companies look at risk. They look at the risk in the marketplace. What is the supply-demand balance? They look at the risks of an investment. And in the case of Venezuela, they need a lot of capital going into infrastructure. And that infrastructure has to be in place before the oil comes out of the ground. So we're talking here about billions of dollars to start to restore the infrastructure that will get things going to allow oil on a sustainable basis to rise by a mere 400,000 or 500,000 barrels a day. That's $20 billion. $20 billion is not nothing when oil companies have opportunities in Guyana, opportunities in Argentina, opportunities in Brazil, and opportunities in Africa. So the question is, what will attract companies to spend the capital that Trump needs for the transaction to work?
Paul, Chevron debt 11.7% is where they are right now, just as an example.
What do you think the U.S. government, or what do you think those energy companies would need from the U.S. government in terms of assurances or whatever to commit that capital, do you think?
Well, they need the reassurance from the Venezuelan side as well as from the U.S. government, because the U.S. government said it is not taking over Venezuela.
Yeah, good point.
So it needs to have the confidence, which will be step by step, and I suspect that the first step will be with Chevron, to see whether they can make good in short-term capital with short-term return. So I think it's going to be a slow process, but it will be trust building on trust, and we'll see how smooth that transition goes.
Talk to us, just describe the energy. When we talk about Venezuela, what do they have? What do they need? How big are they? How important is this? Because I understand there's a lot underground.
It's quite important. So the world has known for a long time that Venezuela has the largest known oil reserves in the world. The problem is it's not the kind of oil that the rest of the world needs or wants. And the problem is it's in Venezuela. It's complicated oil to get out of the ground. But they've done it before, and they've managed to go from under 2 million barrels a day to 3.5 million barrels a day in a relatively short period of time, a couple of decades ago. So if the will is there and the government is there to provide the guarantees, but to do that, you need the government institutions to be reborn. Those government institutions have themselves deteriorated dramatically. They don't have the human resources. They don't have the personnel to be able to guide it. So part of the process will be a return of that human resource base.
Edward Morris with us for a lengthy conversation this morning with Hartree and, of course, Definitive and Citigroup, among other services to the United States over his long decades on petroleum, on hydrocarbons. I believe I've shared the stage with you and Shannon O'Neill at the Council on Foreign Relations. Dr. O'Neill was on with us recently, exceptionally gloomy about Venezuela's ability to reorganize, given an event like what we've seen. I assume you've been to Caracas more than 40 times. You remember Caracas from another time and place. Do you have any optimism that they can move from a Cuba-like society to something that can get capitalism done?
Well, you have to be a little bit optimistic given the change that has already taken place. So getting Maduro out of that position is a major step. And now the government is in a crisis of survival. That survival will require them to cooperate with the U.S. So the options that they have are quite limited. Who is going to replace the U.S. At this moment in time, given the U.S. military position, the naval position surrounding Venezuela, the control that the U.S. has over Venezuelan exports? It's not easy to imagine a replacement for that. So the good news really is that they are cooperating to start, and we'll see how that goes, but it will be a long road with difficulty.
Is it your understanding, just based upon the limited reporting that we have in the last 48 hours, that the government of Venezuela was in contact with the Trump administration to facilitate Mr. Maduro being taken?
Look, it could not have been done without there being some contact within the government.
Okay.
We know from reporting that that the intelligence operations preceded this. They were on the ground. They had to have help to be on the ground. And undoubtedly, they were not taken by surprise because of the smooth way events went on over the weekend.
How do you think China is viewing what's going on these days?
China's in a difficult position. They are a massive creditor to Venezuela. Venezuela has been central to the Belt and Road Initiative in enlarging China's influence in Latin America. Excuse me, and it's been frankly a failure. They have between 50 and 100 billion of debt. Their operations right now are to export oil to pay for that debt. The U.S. controls their exports out of Venezuela. So they yes, they came down and condemned the U.S. government. They had to do that. But they have to take a quiet approach because there's so much at stake between them and the U.S. on a global basis, so much at stake on a bilateral basis, including the tariffs that they want to see some resolution on. I think we'll see quiet diplomacy with China and the U.S. rather than stamping on the foot or saying anything about military force.
In my reading, I've heard that. But what does Edward Morris, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, Dr. Morris, do we need to show the flag this morning in Kaohsiung Port in Taiwan? Does the U.S. Navy need to get over there and, like Perry centuries ago, show the flag?
Tom, I think the U.S. showed the flag before Maduro was taken out. They showed the flag with a massive military sail to Taiwan.
Right.
And the military has been there. The Navy has been there. China is not in a position to fool around with the U.S., even with much of the U.S. naval fleet now around Venezuela. So I think it's going to be stepping, very lightly on what could happen.
Edward Morris with us, folks, a special edition of Bloomberg Surveillance. We've really held back the commercial interruptions to give you this conversation for America around the world. You have such a relationship with Faisal and An in Saudi Arabia. How does the Middle East in general, and particularly Riyadh and Jeddah, how do they respond to these actions?
They're responding quite quietly. Riyadh is looking at the global setting. They know that Venezuela could be a threat to the production agreement within OPEC Plus, but not in the short run. In the short run, they're looking at the year ahead. The year ahead is quite uncertain and quite messy, and it was that way before the taking of Maduro. So we have Russia-Ukraine. We have uncertainty on the distortion and disruption side around the world, and the Saudis have also a military tie to the U.S. that they don't want to lose. So they have to, and they look at their budget. The budget requires a lot of borrowing. That borrowing may include in their own minds how low can prices go for us to continue.
Folks, I failed, Paul, I failed. Ed Morris nailed the decline in oil. Do you have a lower oil target from here for Hartree?
So we don't know how low the price will go. It's lifted a little bit by the geopolitical risk. I'd say the supply-demand balance, which is higher supply than there is demand now and going forward, is for oil testing Brent at 40. And I think testing Brent at 40 is something the Saudis can swallow. How much lower than that they can swallow it is not known.
I want to get this in because Paul's got 8 questions.
They can't
So you're going to go
absorb
visit Trump.
No way.
President Trump is going to be an Edward Morris coffee with the president. You're going to talk about a transactional American president. And I know you're going to get a phone call from Ottawa where Mark Carney is going to go, Edmonton's playing Ottawa. Ed Morris, come join me at an Ottawa Senators hockey game. I mean, this is the way it's going to work. What do you say to Mark Carney of Canada?
Well, I'll start with Trump because I haven't answered your question on what I say to Trump. And what I say to Trump is your policy on energy dominance is a wonderful strategy. But, Mr. President, I think you're ignoring some things about energy dominance. And there are 2 things about it. One is that you can't get to where you want without having a significant growth, because this is a world transitioning to electricity intensity, and you can't do the electricity intensity you need for AI and cloud computing and energy dominance without renewables. You can't do it even without hydrogen. So you've got to enlarge what you think about energy dominance.
We have so much. We have so much natural gas that we waste it. We just burn it up. If they are able to use that natural gas for the electrical grid, we won't need all of these solar panels, nuclear power, or windmills and all that stuff. It's natural gas. That's the future right there, natural gas. And we already have plants in place to burn the natural gas and the coal, the clean coal plants. So we have tons of coal and we have tons of natural gas. There is zero reason that you absolutely need to have renewables. Now, you may need renewables for local generation for AI. Let's say you have an AI server farm and you're going to 100% produce the electricity for that server farm. Okay, all right, it's decentralized, fine. But in terms of building out our grid ain't going to be built out on renewables. It doesn't have the power density. It's going to be natural gas, and it's going to be coal. And it's going to be like that for the rest of your life.
Mr. President, you've got to think about the U.S. The U.S. is not one country when it comes to energy, it's 6. We have 2 exporting segments in the U.S. They have the Gulf Coast of the U.S., and I'm not talking about the Gulf of America or the Gulf of Mexico, but the Gulf Coast. And we have Alaska, both exporters of fossil fuels. And then we have 2 massive importers of fossil fuel with no tie. And Mr. President, here's the lesson. The reason that we have 2 importers on the West Coast and the East Coast that are massive in scale, global in scale, is because another period of dominance around World War I, we thought we were the best shipbuilding country in the world, and we wanted to retain that dominance. So the Jones Act was enacted, and the Jones Act has meant that when it comes to energy, we are importers because we can't afford American ships to take oil from the Gulf Coast to the West Coast or the East Coast. We need foreign vessels, and they carry foreign
So
ships.
this is the moment to do away with the Jones Act.
This is the moment to do away with the Jones
photograph,
Act.
yeah.
And also to tell the president energy dominance. A good idea needs a little bit of massaging at the edges.
I mean, a photograph of Theodore Roosevelt with a map of Venezuela behind it from, I believe, Paul, 1909, was just stunning. I mean, this history going back. Or Paul Sweeney with Edward Morse.
So when you go down to Houston, you talk to these big energy companies today, are they happy with what's going on in the last 24, 48 hours? Or are they apprehensive? Do they see a big opportunity here?
They see a better opportunity than they've seen in years, but they are apprehensive. The risk of putting capital, their shareholders' capital at risk looms extremely large in their minds. So there's not going to be a rush to put money into Venezuela until we see what the structure of the investment might look like.
I'm surprised I don't see a move in WTI and Brent crude today. Now, I couldn't have told you is it going to be up 5% or down 5%, but kind of got nothing going on here today.
Well, in my prepared remarks, I thought that was the first question. I didn't know, that we were going to have prices go down a little bit.
It's Bloomberg surveillance. We make it up as
we're winging it.
No, I'm not surprised.
Okay.
There is no change in the energy market, period.
There you go. All right. So, but I think at some point, it just feels like almost OPEC and OPEC Plus become less and less relevant every day.
OPEC and OPEC Plus have become less relevant every day since the beginning of this decade. And when we look at the positions that have put this in place, it's not just the rise of Guyana and Brazil and Argentina again, but it really is the U.S. The U.S., I have this battle with my colleagues at work almost every day. The U.S. is not just a crude oil producer. It is a massive liquids producer. We are a producer of 23, 24 million barrels a day. And our growth has been in natural gas liquids. Natural gas liquids compete with oil out of a refinery. They compete with gasoline. They compete with distillate. They compete with fuel oil. They're there for transportation. They're there for home heating and power generation and industrial use. So we are the disruptor of the global market, and we're the ones who put OPEC Plus in a position of defense.
And so what they do is that they produce more oil to try to maintain market share. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the Gladiator Barley. This will help to build muscle, bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals, and detoxify your body. And when you do that, you're improving your immune system, you're improving your endocrine system, you're helping with your cardiovascular system by bringing down inflammation, and you're helping with your brain function. It's dual purpose. This is a month's supply. Take it every day, and if you do resistance training, you'll build muscle. So it's a win-win. It's a great supplement to take. Myotrol will help with gene expression to build muscle and to maintain muscle. If you're 40 years of age or older, you should be taking Myotrol. Why? Because of atrophy. Most people, once they get older, it's harder for them to maintain muscle and build muscle because of your gene expression has changed. Your genes start to methylate, and the gene expression to building muscle is less when you get older. By taking Myotrol, it's going to help with the gene expression to build muscle. It has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with that gene expression. It also helps the health of your mitochondria so you have more ATP to maintain that muscle. If you're an athlete, young or older, you'll benefit from taking Myotrol. You'll recover quicker after your workout and build strength for your sport. Now, you can take them separately. You can take the Gladiator Barley and the Myotrol separately, but better yet, stack them together to get the max benefit. Helps with the gene expression, and Gladiator Barley helps with building the muscle. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the Myotrol and Gladiator Barley. And another great supplement that I have that will help with detoxifying your body is zeolite. Zeolite, you take 3 small drops underneath your tongue, drink filtered water, and this will help to get rid of heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals. It'll bind to them and allow you to urinate those chemicals out within 6 to 8 hours. Do this every day. 3 small drops underneath your tongue and drink filtered water. And by doing that, you're improving your immune system and your endocrine system and your other organ systems. When you get rid of the junk, guess what? Your body starts to work better. So please go to my store and get the zeolite. Make sure you drink it with filtered water. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. Alrighty. Now, let's listen in to the CIA involved in Maduro.
Here we go again. Everyone wants to know, so here it is.
Melania, rated PG, exclusively in theaters January 30th.
We are now learning more about the moments leading up to the capture of Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro and his wife. Operation Absolute Resolve took months of planning, going all the way back to August, when the CIA deployed a unit to monitor Maduro's movements. And on Saturday, elite U.S. military forces used that intel to storm Venezuela and capture Maduro in the middle of the night. Here's Secretary of State Marco Rubio detailing that operation.
It is not easy to land helicopters in the middle of the largest military base in the country. The guy lived on a military base. Land within 3 minutes, kick down his door, grab him, put him in handcuffs, read him his rights, put him in a helicopter, and leave the country without losing any American or any American assets. I do think this is one of the most, daring, complicated, sophisticated missions this country has carried out in a very long time. Tremendous credit to the U.S. military personnel who did it. It was unbelievable.
U.S. Marine veteran Chad Robichaux, who helped lead rescue missions during the Afghanistan withdrawal, joins me now. And Chad, look, as someone who has experience extracting people, albeit the good guys, and understands how difficult that can be, what do you make of this mission? Specifically, the speed with which it occurred and the fact that there was no American loss of life.
I mean, it's absolutely amazing. And you have to look at who these guys are. I mean, when President Trump and Secretary Hegseth legitimately designated these cartel regimes as terrorist groups, now you have the ability of Joint Special Operations Command partnering with our elite intelligence agencies. And when you have a commander-in-chief and secretary that'll get behind them and let them actually do their job, there's nowhere in the world that our adversaries can't hide. And the world just got a demonstration of that. These guys prepared for months. They're able to, I mean, you're talking about Delta Force, SEAL Team 6 assaulters. They're able to go in at any moment, anywhere in the world. But the fact that they had time to prepare with intelligence from the CIA, prepare for this, shows how precision it can be. And it's not just JSOC's, not just about Delta Force or SEAL Team 6. You're talking about the full capabilities and the most robust intel networks in the world with the most logistically capable units that support those units to put them on targets and do exactly what they just did.
The fact that the CIA was on the ground in Venezuela was no surprise. We reported it on this program. President Trump announced, hey, the CIA is on the ground in Venezuela. So obviously, Nicolas Maduro knew. How high do you think our CIA operatives were in the Venezuelan government?
I mean, I think they were at the top. I mean, you're not just talking about CIA employees. You're talking about the network of intelligence and human intelligence and resources that we have. If they're doing their job, then they're going to have assets and resources all the way to the top, right next to Maduro. And obviously he knew that. That's why he was so paranoid. But you can be as paranoid as you want. You just can't stop the long arm of our U.S. intelligence agencies, especially when they're partnered with a unit like a Joint Special Operations Command.
Is there anything that surprised you about this mission?
No, it had to be done. Nicolas Maduro didn't just rise through legitimate leadership. He's a dictator that seized power from his people. 7 million Venezuelans had to flee the country, not because of policy, because his criminal governance. Of Venezuela. I have friends that are from Venezuela that I skydive with, and they had to leave during his takeover because they hadn't had to get their families out. They're celebrating right now, and aside from the Venezuelan people who got their country, who are going to get their country back now. I mean, the United States was suffering under the threat of this narco terrorism. Venezuela's not the only one, by the way. We all know that, but it needed to be done. And President Trump, I feel President Trump gave grace and patience for Maduro to turn things around and do the right thing, and he wasn't going to do it. We knew he wasn't going to do it. And so it's no surprise that this happened. I am not surprised that when Joint Special Operations Command and our military troops are allowed to do their job, that they can do it with such precision and accuracy as they did. Not surprised by that at all. They've been handcuffed for so long. It's so amazing to see a commander-in-chief lets them do their job.
This absolutely speaks volumes about the coordination and leadership at the Pentagon. I mean, look, we have it on our screen right here. What it took to pull this off. You mentioned the CIA. They provided the intel, surveillance, target tracking. Then you have the Delta Force precisely rehearsed and executed the raid. They built literally a replica of Maduro's home. Think about that. And then the Night Stalkers flew in on very low altitudes to that location. Remember, that's the same group that supported the 2011 raid on bin Laden. Quickly, before we let you go, obviously, men and women did this mission. Without them, we don't have it. I want to talk quickly about the equipment, because this equipment took fire, and it did not come down. Stayed in the air. Flew everybody to where they needed to get to safety. What can you tell us about the equipment that was used in this mission?
Well, I mean, like you said, the Night Stalkers who went in, I mean, they're going to have the best aircraft in the world. They're going to have the best equipment. But one of the things you mentioned is the best equipment for preparing. I've seen at some of these elite units, the training rooms where you can add modular walls and move walls around. You can get schematics through intelligence or through architectural records of a room, a building, a ship, a vessel anywhere in the world, and you can rebuild that facility and rehearse in the real scenario that you're going to be presented with when you go through and you breach through a door. So these operators have the facilities that they have, the training equipment they have, not just what you use in the mission, but having our military funded correctly and be able to train properly. And then when they actually get on target using the best equipment is why it's so important. It's why you hear veterans like me preaching or cheerleading when we get our budgets properly distributed to our military troops, so they can actually train about to do something like this when it's time to do it.
The capacity of the United States military never ceases to amaze. Chad Robichaux, thank you. Thanks for your insight. Appreciate it.
I'm Steve Ducey. I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the
China, as you mentioned earlier, and now, kind of Latin America here. Is there concern when you talk to folks within the industry that maybe this military is getting stretched a little thin here?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always that concern. And I mean, the U.S. military, continues to be, I think, in the of the free nations around the world, it's the largest, it's the most capable, as we saw, but it also gets, a lot of missions get pushed upon it to do. So it's always sort of stretched too thin. I just, I think that's part of the discussion that Trump is having with Europe right now. It's not always conducted maybe the most elegantly, but I think part of the discussion is you're a big economic bloc. You have a lot of GDP strength behind you, about 80% of what the U.S. has, yet your military is almost nothing.
Yep.
And we really need you to sort of step up not only your manpower, but your capabilities, step up your buy of equipment, high-end equipment, and invest in technology so you can bear some of the burden that we have managing all these challenges around the world. So it's certainly stretched too thin. I think we're hoping allies will come into the game more.
That's been a clear message. George, thanks so much for joining us. George Ferguson, Will Lee, they cover the aerospace and defense companies and industries for Bloomberg Intelligence. For our listeners in the U.S., a reminder, you can listen to us via satellite radio on Sirius XM Channel 121. Access the world's only global audio business network, coast to coast, 24 hours a day. Bloomberg Radio on Sirius XM Channel 121 is presented by Golden
Build a website you love with Wix. For your words, create your brand.
The market reactions make perfect sense to me, and that's what we've been calling for. And the simple reason is Venezuela's oil was going to only one buyer, China. And from the middle of 2024 to December, China has already bought almost 300 million barrels of oil. That's the amount of oil if US puts in the SPR, it will get to fill from its current level, SPR level of 400. So if there were many buyers and they don't get the Venezuelan oil and they have to go for alternate oil, then the oil prices react. Only one buyer who has already bought a lot, this was expected, this was priced in.
What do you think the U.S. meant by running Venezuela? I mean, in terms of oil supplies, I mean, essentially, are they going to decide who pumps the oil, for example? I mean, in terms of, really getting production back, I mean, how difficult would it actually look?
You asked a very good question, and I think the answer is probably less in the politics of it, but more in the chemistry of oil. And my answer is that, one, there is a lot of hype around, I saw the previous person, greatest oil reserves at 300 billion barrels. That is wrong. Those are paper barrels. In somewhere 2008 or so, when the oil prices touched $150 per barrel, the Venezuelan then president just increased the numbers because a lot of the heavy oil, this oil is twice as heavy as the normal Middle Eastern barrels. So at that very high price, they proved that we have a lot more oil. At the current prices, these are paper reserves, and probably the reserves are probably less than or near 100 million barrels. So that's one point. And the second point is that this oil is so heavy to produce, and the number of refineries in the US and elsewhere is declining who wants this kind of an oil. We already know Saudi Arabia in the recent times canceled a 1 million barrels per day heavy crude oil project, Sahania. So this is not the oil what the world needs in the future as we go where we need less gasoline, less diesel. So I guess a lot of hot talk, a lot of, wrong analysis happening, and that's I wanted to just call out.
Okay, well, that's why we got you on to help us understand the nuance. It's almost like me saying I should have been the Olympic gold medal sprinter if only I trained every day of my life since I was born. But help me understand this then. So in the meantime, though, so the Venezuelans have stepped back as far as supply is concerned, and really the group that's filled the gap are some of the heavy oil producers out of Canada. Do I look at that group as potentially, if all goes to plan, as perhaps the potential losers here, the Canadians?
Good question again, David. I think you gave a very good analogy. I think that you did a better job than me. Now, in terms of Canada, there are no tariffs, and since these hot discussions have taken place between Canada and US, Canada has only lost about 500,000 barrels of oil, and that barrel of oil has gone to China. There is probably a limit to what China will buy more, because China has already bought a huge amount of Iranian heavy barrels. China has already bought a huge amount of Venezuelan barrels. So China is kind of the vacuum cleaner of the oil markets for quite some time, and an oil bank for these sanctioned countries. So there won't be a very significant appetite for Canada. So I would say in short term, Canada is probably not a winner, but what Canada is probably doing is the right thing, creating some optionality so that they just don't depend on the US. But overall, I believe the heavy oil producers are not going to be winners. The winners will be in the Middle Eastern medium sour barrels.
I see. You mentioned about China. I mean, so do you see any sort of impact, this takeover by the U.S., on big oil buyers like China then?
No impact is my answer. And my answer is simple. Everybody in China prepared very well for this scenario. From the middle of 2024.
Is that really true? Or is this guy not knowing what he's talking about? Because we just heard that the Chinese want to understand what the systemic risk is because of the United States taking over Venezuelan production. And the Chinese economy sucks right now. This is not playing well for the Chinese at all.
As I mentioned, China has tellers of us buying around 100 KBD, 1,000 barrels per day. China jacked it up. Now the January arrivals are at 900, and there is huge amount of floating oil, Venezuelan oil, also around China. So I would say China is well stocked up on these kind of heavy barrels. Yeah. So no impact on China is my answer.
There may be no impact in the immediate, but you also have an impact with their banks because there's counterparty risk now. What about the bond market? What about projects that they've invested in Venezuela? How is that going to be paid back? So it's not just exposure to the oil market, but the overall economy. Because what was happening was China was moving into our backyard. And Trump said, no, we're not going to have that anymore. And he kicked them out. So there's going to be some sort of systemic risk that's going to happen for China. Now it's true that there's a lot of oil out there floating on the sea and, in reserves and all this, right? There's a lot of supply that's stored. So that's the reason why we're seeing oil suppressed. There's a couple of reasons why the oil price is suppressed. I think Trump made an agreement with MBS and basically said, okay, we want more oil on the market, keep it down so the energy costs help suppress inflation, okay? And Saudi Arabia saying, I need market share. A lot of these OPEC plus nations were going over their quota. So they were, at least short term, wanting to pump more oil. So there is a lot of oil on the market right now. I think partially due to an agreement between Saudi Arabia and Trump, and partially because Saudi Arabia needs to gain market share. But they can't keep the production going. Now, they didn't say that they were going to increase production in the last OPEC meeting. They said they were going to hold steady, right? They're not reducing production. But the moment that they say they're reducing production, bam, the oil price is going to start going up, all right? But there's a lot of oil out there right now. But this is a time to accumulate, right? And then all of a sudden, when the market does go up, you'll benefit from it, right? When that's going to happen, who knows? I also suspect that the problems that are happening in Iran is going to put pressure and push oil price up. So I think what's happening in Iran needs to be part of the calculus here. But China, in the short run, won't be affected with this oil. But there may be systemic risk on what's going on in Venezuela affecting their banks, affecting China's banks, or other companies that are tied to investments in different countries and all this stuff. So China is definitely hurt by this. Short term and long term. Because long term, the oil stopped. Where are they going to get it? Eventually, that oil that's been produced is going to go away.
Then, how does this, since it seems the conversations keep going back to the Middle East, might this affect how the other big oil producers decide how they turn on or turn off supply?
So I think the amount of barrels we are talking about which Venezuela was exporting to China is about 900. In my view, the entire this situation is only a U.S.-China conflict. It's nothing to do with possibly the reserves in Venezuela. And then you rightly point out then the OPEC. So if we lose some of these barrels in the market, then OPEC does have some opportunity. And OPEC has opportunity simply because of the right quality of the barrels they hold. Even the US shale, which is a lighter barrel and getting lighter, is also not the right quality. So I would say more than the volumes for the OPEC player, the quality is on their side, and that's where they will continue to calibrate. And one more point, very important point, which often gets missed, is that Middle Eastern OPEC players are not just crude producers. They build big refineries. They are big product producers. They pump a lot of
We're going to
oil
go to Bloomberg because Maduro's hearing is starting.
So I don't really see that forthcoming in the criminal case, but you never know what's going on behind the scenes. I don't see a diplomatic advantage to that either. And really, this seems like a big way to draw attention away domestically from things like the Epstein files and failure to support Vladimir Zelensky in Ukraine to try to draw the focus to Venezuela.
Very little mention of the Epstein files over the weekend. Robert McWhorter is well known to our audience because we call on our friend in Maricopa County pretty often at times like these. One thing you may not know, and I didn't know this, Robert, until producer James brought me up to date. You spent a good chunk of time, 2000, 2001, working for the World Bank and the U.S. State Department on programs of judicial reform in Venezuela. This was at the start of the Chavez regime. You also spent a year in El Salvador managing a U.S. program to reform the courts there, the justice system, and police. So we're talking to an authority, and I'm wondering what you think happens next.
For the ones that are watching the dashboard, you can see on BTC, which is Bitcoin, how it's trading at 94,150 and how it bounced off of the 61.8% retracement resistance level. It's very, I mean, it's just like perfect. It's a perfect bounce.
A year and a half ago. And so there is going to be some popular support in Venezuela for a change, I grant you that. But really, Maduro's party, Chavez's party, is still in power. The other thing I will say is Donald Trump, he says, we're in charge in Venezuela now. That's really kind of an absurd statement. But how is he going to affect that? Because if you recall, in the first week of this second Trump administration, he wiped out USAID, United States Agency for International Development. That was the organ in the federal government that was used to run countries and do nation building. Well, Donald Trump and Doge wiped it out. It's no longer in existence. So just when he says we're supposed to be in charge, we don't have any way to take care of anything anymore because he wiped it out.
Well, fascinating, Robert. Thank you for spending time with us. I know your time is tight, and we'd love to talk with you more.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the clarity factor. This will get rid of brain fog, allow you to concentrate on tasks, improve your memory. Over time, what's going to happen is that you're going to improve your neuroplasticity. You're going to improve that positive neuroplasticity. Your dendritic connections are going to improve. Your thinking will be faster. Your memory will be faster. This is a very important neural stack. Take it every day, improve your brain function. Also, to help improve your brain function, you need good sleep. Good sleep will allow you to slow down the aging process. Good Night Formula has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower to allow you to get into 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep a night. Take it every night, and guess what? You're detoxifying your central nervous system. You're going to be well rested, and you're consolidating memory. Chronic sleep deprivation increases the chances of early onset of dementia. All right? And guess what? The aftershock of 2020 and the crisis that we had, there are going to be many people that are going to get early onset of dementia. So you better start protecting your neurons. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Good Night Formula. Now, collagen. It's a dual-purpose product. It's going to help with the health of your skin, your nails, and your hair, help with your musculature, your bone density, and your joint health and your cartilage. Super important to take every day. Now, this is a month supply, and it improves your skin even more if you follow this protocol. Take the collagen, drink 32 to 64 ounces of water throughout the day. Take the vitamin C and magnesium from my store. That vitamin C and the collagen with the filtered water are going to cross-link and improve your dermal layer. To improve your topical layer, use my structural nanosilver gel. And to improve the basal layer, use the C60 and the resveratrol. And that way, you're improving the basal layer and the new skin cells, You're improving your dermal layer with the collagen, the vitamin C, and the filtered water. And you're improving your topical layer with the structural nanosilver gel. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen. Now, you can save money by getting the anti-aging skincare box, beginners or advanced, if you want to improve your skin health. But again, by taking the collagen, you're improving other systems like your hair, your nails, your musculature, your joint health, and your bone density, especially if you're doing resistance training. All right, let's listen in to Maduro.
And Miles, that headline just crossed the terminal, a red headline. Maduro says he is not guilty of U.S. narco-terrorism charges. Is his wife being charged as a co-conspirator, or are they facing the same counts here, Miles?
Oh, they're both charged in this 4-count indictment, Joe, and it's believed by prosecutors believe, I should say, that they were both part and parcel of this narco conspiracy, and here's why. It starts with Maduro in the assembly doing all he can to help narco terrorists, they say, and then when he becomes foreign minister, continuing that, and his wife as well, when she was in the assembly, doing work to get them diplomatic passports. They say this was a family narco business. It's not enough that there were just passports gotten so that these alleged narco terrorists would be able to get drugs in and out of the country and the proceeds from these drugs in and out of the country, but their son, nicknamed the Prince, on one of the state oil planes, going back and forth to Margarita Island, all in an effort to move some of these drug proceeds, tightly packed in plastic bags, we're told. They're saying this is a major narcotics conspiracy, involved the highest levels of the government, obviously the president, his wife, the interior minister. And these charges are so serious, they face life in prison. And these charges first stemmed from an indictment in 2020. So they've been trying to capture Maduro for quite some time. Biden put a $25 million bounty on his head, and Trump carried out on that.
Remarkable and great reporting, Miles. Thank you so much. A remarkable update from just outside the courthouse. If you're listening on the radio as opposed to watching us here on YouTube, you can hear the circus-like atmosphere outside that courthouse with a not guilty plea just now entered. You heard it as it happened. Maduro's lawyer asking to enter a plea of not guilty on all counts. That's a red headline now on the terminal as we make good on the seizure that began overnight Friday into Saturday. You've seen and heard it all unfold in real time here on Bloomberg, and we're not done. Well, coming up next, add the voice of Leland Lazarus, the founder of Lazarus Consulting, former diplomat, former Department of Defense official on the mission that just took place and may continue to evolve in the Caribbean. I'm Joe Matthew in Washington. Thanks for coming along. This is Bloomberg.
Before the judge, pleading innocent in court, telling the judge, quote, "I am a decent man, the president of my country," also telling the judge, "I was captured," as he makes his first court appearance on drug trafficking charges. So all of this coming in as the media is allowed to watch in overflow rooms. In the courtroom itself, there are no recording devices allowed. However, reporters and members of the public are allowed to watch in the overflow room via courtroom monitors. So we did want to share that with you. The defense attorneys and prosecutors announcing their appearances. The judge, who can't be seen on courtroom monitors, is presiding, announcing that he has been assigned to the case, saying, quote, "It's my job to assure this is a fair trial. That's my job, and that's what I intend." We are continuing to follow all of the very latest, and coming up after the break, we are going to be speaking with a Fox Multimedia reporter, Kaylee Schuyler.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin B complex. This is really important. If you're 40 years of age or older, this will help to speed up your metabolism. When you're improving the metabolism of your cells and your tissues, your organ systems will perform better. You'll have more energy. And guess what? You'll lose weight. And vitamin B complex also helps the health of your mitochondria to boost up those energy levels. The ATP is super important for your cells. And vitamin B complex has vitamin B12 to help protect your neurons, which is another thing that's super important if you're 40 years of age or older. A lot of people, you're going to notice a lot of people in the next 5 years are going to have early onset of dementia because either ischemic, which is the bulk of the cases, or amyloidosis, or a very small percentage, about 0.1% of 30%. The ones that are 40 years of age or older right now, within 5 years, you're going to start seeing about 0.1% of them are going to have prion disease. And the reason why? Because of the crisis that we just went through in 2020. Pay attention to me. Better start protecting your neurons. You don't want to see someone that you know or go through yourself tissue destruction. Right? It sucks. Please go to my store and get the resveratrol. Resveratrol will soak up free radicals, help the health of your mitochondria, boost up those energy levels in the ATP, help with youthful gene expression, and get rid of cells that are in senescence. Super important. This also helps the basal layer of your skin so you look better. All right? You ever heard about taking resveratrol and how it slows down the aging process? It does. I've been taking resveratrol for decades. It stacks really well with C60, especially for your basal layer, for your skin. So please go to my store, get the resveratrol, and get the vitamin B complex. And again, pay attention. Because of the crisis that we went through in 2020, people that are 40 years of age or older right now, within 5 years, 30% of them will get early onset of dementia. Out of that 35%, or out of those 30%, 75% will have vascular problems where you'll have microclotting and microbleeding that causes neural death. 24.9% will have amyloidosis, where you have a building up of plaque because of misfolded proteins. And 0.1% of the 30% will have prion disease. Now, what are you going to do about it? The bulk of the problem is you got to cut down the inflammation. You cut down the inflammation and improve your cardiovascular health, you'll weather the storm better. I just gave you the solution. Instead of a bunch of fucking celebrity docs out there that don't even know what they're doing.
Software giant Palantir is a major leader in artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics, and defense, continuing its leadership position into 2026. The stock this morning is up after dipping slightly in the first 2 trading days of the new year, but it is up sharply over the last year as investors look to fourth quarter earnings, which will be out on February 2nd. Palantir is up better than 110% over the last year. It is up better than 24% in the past 6 months. Had a little bit of a dip in November because of valuation concerns and continues its bullish chart. My next guest is here to make the case for AI optimism heading into the new year. Joining me now is the Chief Technology Officer of Palantir, Shyam Sankar. Shyam, great to have you this morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be back with you. Thank you.
And of course, Fox News Media is currently working with Palantir to build a suite of custom AI tools. And I know you've talked a lot about the transition to the factory floor as a result of AI. I want to get your take on how AI is changing the business, whether it's government contracts in terms of defense products or the factory floor. What's your take?
Well, there is a historic opportunity for America to underwrite the next decade of our prosperity with AI. I think there is a doomerism narrative that's coming out of both Silicon Valley and Wall Street, where there's a totally different reality that's happening on the factory floor, in the ICU nursing centers, with our submarine-based industrial suppliers, that's leading to job growth. This is about empowering the American worker, giving the American worker superpowers that allows us to underwrite our reindustrialization as a nation. That's what's happening every day out there right now. And I think the market has largely figured out that Palantir is the leading company, if not the only company, that is building and implementing AI aligned with American values, AI that's supporting American prosperity.
And of course, President Trump has been reiterating the need to get supply chains back to America. You've been sounding the alarm as well on the need for America to, quote, reindustrialize, to deter World War III. Now, Palantir obviously has major government partnerships. You're working with the U.S. Army, Air Force, Space Force, Navy. That Navy partnership, the most recent, accelerating shipbuilding through a $448 million investment called ShipOS. But Sean, I want to get your take on how AI has changed the business here. Walk us through it.
Ashton was a high-level athlete. She was even at 5. We started noticing that something wasn't quite right.
Walk us through it.
Well, so much of, so if you think about our work in defense, most people think about us in the work we do on the factory floor, helping and planning missions and operations. But the other element of deterrence is really, in the foxhole, the other element of deterrence is really the factory floor. It's how do we make our weapons, our platforms, can we make them at a rate that actually deters our adversaries? And the opportunity has been with ShipOS, you see rolling out integrated planning, supply chain solutions that reduce the dwell time. You can make more parts more quickly, you can get more subs in the water. One of our suppliers was actually able to add a third shift. They were able to hire more American workers by using AI to accelerate how they do production planning and manage the supply chain. That meant they could more effectively and profitably hire American workers to produce more equipment. I think this underwrites the basis of it. So you see this with Panasonic Energy. They produce electric vehicle batteries. And the training time has been reduced from 3 years to 3 months for casino workers who are transitioning into this highly skilled role because of AI. So I think having the right focus on how we use AI to drive American prosperity and the competitiveness of our companies is how we're going to reindustrialize.
Yeah, it's a great point, and certainly something that America needs right now. Palantir has seen unprecedented demand for AIP, especially across commercial industries, all commercial enterprise industries. But with all of this money moving into AI, Sean, I guess the question has to be asked, are we actually going to see a return on investment over the near term? Because when I spoke with Jensen Huang recently, he was talking about trillions of dollars being spent on AI every year. Here's what he said when I asked the same question. Watch this. Jensen, I want to get your take on all the money moving into the AI infrastructure build-out. How much are you expecting that to be, and will we see a return on investment in that money soon?
Artificial intelligence in the last year made some humongous breakthroughs. It is now effective, it's useful, it's generating really good results for users. It's impacting every single industry that we're observing. Everything from healthcare to, of course, enterprise computing, where we do work, and whether it's manufacturing, robotics, we're seeing breakthroughs in every industry. That platform shift is just beginning, and we're just seeing it so strong and accelerating because now fundamentally, finally, AI is delivering really great results. And it's the reason why we're seeing the fastest growing companies in the world.
So, Sean, what about that? What can you tell us, given the fact that you had a customer event before the holidays, and a lot of analysts came away really bullish because you made the case of every industry getting impacted by your products?
Well, I would say even more so than that, our customers made the case. And I think that's what's kind of missing here. A lot of the voices in AI right now are on the AI supply side, the people who are building the models and building the chips. I think the much more compelling testimonials are coming out of the customer side, on the demand side, the people who are consuming this stuff and watching their businesses being transformed. If you ask the users, the ICU nurse herself, not only how has it transformed her work, but how she feels about a future for her children in America that's powered by AI, it's incredibly optimistic. So I don't think this is a let's invest trillions and hope and pray there's value. We're seeing the value today, and that's why people are investing more into it.
That is great. And I love the use cases that you just mentioned in terms of healthcare. But talk to us today about defense, given what we've been talking about all morning in Venezuela. Nicolas Maduro and his wife will face an arraignment today at 12 p.m. Eastern. When you're talking about defense, Sean, what should the audience be understanding about the most important AI-related defense products and equipment that are needed?
Well, whether it's the value chain in the commercial world or the kill chain in the defense world, these are the same thing. It's about decision advantage. You want to be more competitive given the stakes in both of these contexts. Now, I think it's about being able to move faster and see the battlefield faster than your adversary can even react to it. I think it's telling that the Chinese are shocked by the efficacy of the operations here. More has changed in the Department of War in the last year under the leadership of President Trump and Secretary Hegseth than we have seen in the last 20 years here. And so the rate at which these technologies are being incorporated to advantage the American warfighter, to ensure our people have the best technology from the foxhole to the factory floor should be encouraging to all American citizens.
Yeah. It's really important to understand. You're also working with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement on a software called Immigration OS. This is a $30 million effort to use AI to track illegal immigrants, potentially leading to apprehensions. The project began in April. It was renewed in late September, bringing this investment to some $60 million. And I said, quote, Palantir is the only source that can provide the required capabilities without causing unacceptable delays. Sean, tell us more.
Yeah, well, we've worked with ICE since 2011 when Agent Jaime Zapata was assassinated by the Zetas in Mexico here. And I think the American people have a right to a secure border. American law enforcement has the right to the best technologies that can help them do this with efficacy, with efficiency, while protecting the privacy and civil liberties. And so we've been very honored to support this mission and this historic opportunity to modernize and ensure the rule of law.
And you launched Chain Reaction with partners Centerpoint Energy and NVIDIA. Sean, what kind of a growth story is Palantir on right now, given that these things are coming together, whether it is ramping up the factory floor and AI changing the game there, or working with government to actually push off our adversaries, which have been on the march aggressively?
It's a historic opportunity. I mean, the numbers really speak for themselves. If you look at, I won't speak to Q4, but if you look at the prior quarters, the rate of growth has been accelerating quarter over quarter here. And I think that reflects not only the incredible demand for what we're doing, but the breadth of how it can be applied, not only to defense, but 50 different industries in the commercial sector, and the ambition that's latent in the American economy here. You know, you want to power AI, you need a lot more data centers, you need a lot more energy production capacity. Companies need to invest in more CapEx. People are adding more shifts. You have more parts and labor planning. You're reshoring so much. There's so much that's happening right now in the American economy that's wildly optimistic, and we're helping to underwrite all of that.
And it is the reason that analysts are betting on a $3 trillion valuation. Sean, we're going to be watching the company closely. We so appreciate your time this morning. Congratulations, Sean. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Sean Sanka.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. This has 68 nutrients. It has a very comprehensive compound profile shown on the screen here. You can read the label on my website. It's a month's supply. Take it every day. Mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, or even with just milk. I take it with hummus. You can mix it with yogurt or even applesauce if you want, but take it every day. You will feel the effects of this within 72 hours. You'll have a steady burn of energy, no spiking of energy. You'll have more vitality, and you'll be more active. This will also help with brain function. You'll be able to concentrate. It gets rid of brain fog. And over time, it's going to help improve the dendritic connections, so you're thinking faster and you have better memory. This will also help build muscle. This will help with your cardiovascular health, rev up your energy levels and your metabolism, so you're maintaining a healthy weight. This is very important to take every day. And when you take this every day, over a year, you're going to notice that you're younger. You're going to look younger, all right? It soaks up free radicals, it keeps down inflammation, and it helps these other organ systems that I just mentioned. Very important, and it's part of the overall protocol that I have, the core, what I call the core protocol. The core protocol is simple. The foundation, multivitamin and probiotic. The first pillar on top of that foundation, max 35 or cleanse to boost up the immune system. The second pillar, C60, soak up free radicals, 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C. The third pillar, turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans, to boost up your immune system and help with your cardiovascular system. You have to remember, better cardiovascular system also helps your brain function. And Boomer Boost is the fourth pillar to rev up those energy levels and your metabolism. You'll be able to control your A1C levels. Please go to my store and get the Boomer Boost.
Next on Bloomberg.
It seems like Judge Hellerstein is just conducting damage. He's done this thousands of times, and I don't know if I'm exaggerating when I say thousands of times. He's been on the bench since President Clinton. In a minute or two, we're going to find out what an adjourned date is. Right. When were they going to find out when to come back to court? How much evidence there is against him? When the evidence has to be presented to the defense attorneys, and how much time they need to make motions.
Is it possible at all to separate the politics from this as a criminal case?
Judge says he will see everyone in court on St. Patrick's Day. Nobody's done the St. Patty's Day together, Lisa. March 17th, and now the defendants are being let out. So it's over. The arraignment is officially over. They'll be back on St. Patty's Day. And in the meantime, the prosecutors are tasked with turning over evidence to the defense attorneys, and they have to look at what's legal, what's illegal, what they're going to try to push back that the jury should never see. And obviously, his defense attorney is going to make a motion about the way he was seized and the fact that he's head of a sovereign state. He shouldn't be here anyway.
So since there was no bail application at this particular hearing,
they're entitled to do that at any time.
But do they go back to MDC or can they?
Oh, no, they go to MDC. I mean, they're going to, unless there's some absolutely unique
medical thing or something like that.
They're going back to MDC, and they'll have special housing. They'll be very separated from everybody. That's the way they'll keep them safe. The way they keep people safe is they just keep them alone, which for someone like him who's used to having a phone and a TV and people around him, and all of a sudden to be sitting there all alone for days and weeks on end, trust me, it is mentally, it's a severe punishment.
So we're going to be down here a lot.
Well, look at the celebrate St. Patty's Day. I'm going to agree. I must have known we're coming back for St. Patty's Day.
Is there any conceivable way or reason that they could be granted bail?
I don't see that happening based on my experience. I mean, look, Puff Daddy put up $50 million, house arrest, nothing in the house, for guards, no phone, no H&M. They still didn't let him out, so I don't see that happening.
The federal court.
I did not see Judge Hellerstein giving bail.
And this judge, again, we talked about him a little bit earlier, but just to remind everybody, he said he's a straight shooter, right?
He's 92 years old, and he started off the remarks saying, I'm here to make sure everything gets treated fairly and everyone's rights are protected. As a matter of fact, Maduro said, Judge, I want to make sure I can keep my notes. And he said, yes, you can keep your notes. So, no one's gonna bully Judge Hellerstein around that, I can tell you.
So now will the lawyers, okay, so the arraignment is close to being over.
They just said he's out. They said the defendants are let out of the courtroom.
Okay, so then they'll now go back to MDC. The lawyers might talk with them for a while.
Yes, usually typically what happens is you can go to another floor where they're housed in a jail, and you talk to them through this little screen which makes your eyes blurry, and you're in a private room, and you get to chat with them, and then they take them back to the MDC.
All right, Arthur Idala, top criminal defense attorney, thank you so much for being with us. So the arraignment is essentially over, and both Maduro and his wife we're hearing the helicopters coming out right now, will be heading back to MDC tonight. No bail application was made at this time. That may happen in the future. We're live in Lower Manhattan. I'm Lisa Evers, Fox 5 News. Back to you in the studio.
Hey, Lisa, all right, and we do thank our Fox 5.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the C60. You can get it in a 2-ounce, a 4-ounce, or an 8-ounce configuration. It is cheaper per ounce for the higher ounce configuration. You can get it in extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, and MCT coconut oil. C60 needs to be in an oil for proper absorption. Take it preferably on an empty stomach. Take a teaspoon a day every day. What this will do is soak up free radicals. So it's 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C. One molecule of C60 is 1,000 times stronger than one molecule of vitamin C. And by taking this every day, you're soaking up free radicals, you're reducing stress in the cell and the tissues, and the cells will perform better. The cells will also have the free radicals absorbed, the mitochondria will be healthier, and you'll have more energy, more ATP. That's super important for better cellular processes. The organ systems will perform better. Your immune system, your endocrine system will be better. By soaking up free radicals at the basal layer of for your skin will improve. You will look younger. Soaking up free radicals at the vascular level will reduce plaque formation, so you'll have a healthier cardiovascular system. And C60 is going to help with brain function by bringing down inflammation and soaking up those free radicals at the neuron level. So please go to my store, get the C60, take a teaspoon a day every day. You will feel the effects of this within 2 months. You're going to start feeling that your immune system and your endocrine system, you'll have more energy, more vitality. For 1 year, taking this 1 year every day, teaspoon a day, you will look younger. Take a before and after photo, and you'll notice that you're looking younger. Now, it's really important that you drink it, make sure that you have filtered water, all right? Make sure that you stay away from processed foods. Reduce your sugar intake. Have mindfulness or some sort of spirituality to bring down your stress levels and to go into parasympathetic mode. Do some resistance training, some cardio, balancing exercises, and stretching. When you do this holistically, with the proper supplementation, you will see radical changes to your body. For the positive, your immune system will improve, your endocrine system will improve, you'll be detoxifying your body, you'll be thinking better, more clearly. Your cardiovascular health will improve, your immune system will improve. If you apply this simple, holistic approach with the proper supplementation I just mentioned in this video, you will get healthy. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Entered on behalf of Maduro, and Maduro, a second time when asked for his plea, said, quote, "I am innocent. I am not guilty of anything that is mentioned here." So we are going to continue to follow all of the breaking news developments. We do know that the next court appearance for Maduro will be March 17th at this federal courthouse as we continue to follow this breaking news. So the arraignment has now concluded. The lawyers have exited. Maduro repeatedly maintaining his innocence, pleading not guilty to all of the charges against him, and repeatedly asserting that he is still the leader of Venezuela. His wife, Celia Flores, who also appeared before the judge during this arraignment, also asserted her role as Venezuela's first lady. The prosecutors outlining the custody timeline, stating that Maduro and Flores were officially taken into law enforcement custody at 11:30 a.m. on Saturday, and that their plane landed.
It's a Fed day the day after. So the hearing is ended. Nicolas Maduro pleading not guilty, not a big shocker, though it was a redhead on the terminal as he and his wife are dragged before a court in New York, SDNY, to face drug trafficking charges. Very dramatic optics earlier today as they pulled him off the chopper in shackles with the jumpsuit, what looked like special forces in camouflage with rifles, dragging him across the tarmac into a vehicle and to the courthouse. Leaving in shackles once again after the hearing ends. I guess he's got some health issues. This is what we're hearing. Maduro says health and medical issues, according to the lawyer there, which I suspect will be detailed at some point. Yeah, James, I don't think it's the Nike sweatsuit. They put him in a different jumpsuit. There's a picture of it right now if you're with us on YouTube. I'm waiting for that story to come out, right? Shares of Nike are going to be higher because the sweatsuit, the Maduro sweatsuit, is selling. You saw the picture of him on the USS Iwo Jima. It emerged as part of our coverage on Saturday morning with the cuffs and the water bottle, the sunglasses and the headphones. and the cool Nike wear. So this is going to be interesting. And by the way, the president has not spoken since he was on Air Force One last evening when he talked about running Venezuela and suggesting that Colombia or Cuba may be next. He does have a 3 p.m. event today at the White House, unrelated, and we'll be curious to see if they open that to reporters here as we make our way through this. But the next big stop on the road happens a couple of hours from now on Capitol Hill, 5:30. If you haven't heard about this, it's important, because there were many calls leading up to this, following the strikes on the alleged drug boats, a covert CIA operation, we were told, on the ground in Venezuela. There were many calls for a briefing, especially from Democrats on Capitol Hill. How many times have you seen Senator Mark Warner make the call here on Bloomberg? Well, today they're going to get it. Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, Pam Bondi, John Ratcliffe, the CIA director, and the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, will be briefing top members of Congress 5:30 p.m. This is the Gang of Eight, known historically not to leak, despite what the White House said, along with Democratic leaders and Republican leaders, Foreign Affairs, Armed Services, in both chambers, a classified briefing from the administration. I don't know if we can hear from Congressman Schneider. We talked to the representative Democrat from Illinois. Is that ready, James? Because there was, as I mentioned, quite a call for classified briefings like these. He's on foreign relations. Here's what he said.
The administration needs to come to Congress as soon as we get back and brief us in a classified format, laying out its justification for the attack, laying out its legal authority for taking this attack. And quite honestly, I don't think the American people wants this administration running another country. They're already having enough trouble running this country.
Let's play it to the panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Jeannie Shanzano and Rick Davis are with us here on the early side on Balance of Power. Rick is, of course, Republican strategist, partner at Stone Court Capital. Good to have you back, Rick. Jeannie, who was up early with us on Saturday, Democracy Visiting Fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. I'm not even sure what questions I'm supposed to be asking, Rick. I know that you've been exposed to a lot of classified briefings like these in the years that you worked for John McCain. How much will the Gang of Eight and these others hear in terms of answering the questions that they want answered ahead of any war powers votes or requests for an authorization for the use of military force?
Yeah, and I think you have to de-link all the political rhetoric and votes on war powers with what's actually happening inside the administration and like this briefing. This briefing will indicate to these members the lead up to the actual exfiltration of the leadership, what was happening, what their strategy was, what their conditions were, what was happening,
he's older, I don't know, late 50s, probably late 50s. I'd have to double check. Maybe he's in, but you notice, notice that? This is the point that I was making earlier. 5 years, people that are 40 years of age or older, you're going to start seeing early onset of dementia. This is the problem right here. You're going to notice that a lot of people are doing this.
In Venezuela, still currently governed by the leadership that came in with Chavista. So the reality
can't say anything in a smooth manner. It's broken up. It's as if they lost their concentration, or you need to take the supplements that will provide the nutrients for your brain function and better blood flow. Super important. Bring down stress levels, go into parasympathetic mode, detoxify your body, and stay away from this negative overuse of social media. It's making people stupid, and it's causing problems with brain function. You're seeing it in real time. All right, now let's compare it with her. See how she's speaking.
We might hear is going to change over time as Americans sort of wake up to the fact that we not only invaded this country, kidnapped this leader, had taken him to the U.S., But now we have a president and the Secretary of State at odds over how we are going to manage this country that Donald Trump suggests that we are now running. So I think the reaction in Congress may change over time, but the reality is in some ways very
the way
simple.
she's speaking, it's nice and smooth, so she doesn't have this problem. But Rick has it. Rick has the problem. Trust me. Now, what is interesting here is that, you know what, dementia has a tendency to, early onset has a tendency to be on the male side and not so much on the female side. Females age a little bit better than males. That's, a component to it. Maybe there's more stress in a male versus a female. Some people would disagree with my assessment on that. But the thing here is that you definitely see the problem with Rick. And I'm telling you, you see it all over the place. Take a look at your coworkers. Take a look at your family members. I guarantee you're seeing the problem. 30% of the people out there that are 40 years of age or older, because of what happened during COVID, you're literally going to have early onset of dementia. All right? 30% of them. It's a lot. That's a lot of the population. Now, it's not all going to be the same. It's a spectrum. Some of it's going to be minor. Some of it's going to be major in terms of severity. But it's happening. It's happening now.
On a microphone at Mar-a-Lago on Saturday said Congress leaks. The fact of the matter is, though, the Gang of Eight is known and takes pride in not leaking, as opposed to, going before committees or talking with random members of Congress. Can you tell us the truth on this? Is that something that this administration actually needed to worry about?
Yeah, I think every president has a different take on operational security as it relates to Congress. This president isn't the first one that looks at Congress as a big sieve of information flowing to the media.
There's nothing that Rick Davis could say that is informative. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the collagen. It's a new product that I have on my store. And it is a very high quality product that will help to rebuild your joints. Okay? Now, it hits a lot of different targets. It brings down inflammation. It helps to remodel the joint, the cartilage, and the gel and the cushioning of your joint. And allows for certain nutrients to go in and actually remodel that joint and that cartilage. So take this every day if you need to remodel joints, if you're having joint pain, or if you've had a sports injury or whatever, or you're just getting older and you're having some joint pain. Take this and it'll help to remodel. All right? Brings down inflammation. It targets MMP3 and MMP13 enzymes. Those start to eat up and cause damage. Well, if you reduce those enzymes, then you're not producing more damage and more inflammation. Collagen will also help provide the collagen 2, and the collagen 2 will help to remodel the actual cartilage. But it'll also help to remodel the cushioning, the gel that you need for the cushioning effect. So your joint has cartilage, right? But it also has a gel-ish kind of substance that will help to cushion the actual joint. That's ACAN. So ACAN is going to be employed. Collagen 2 will be employed to help to remodel the joint. You're bringing down the inflammation by reducing the effects of MMP3 and MMP13 enzyme. And you're also reducing EP4, and you're bringing down inflammation. So you're bringing down inflammation, you're remodeling the joint with the collagen 2 and the ACAN, and you're allowing for the utilization of chondroitin and opening up pathways that allow for glucosamine to come in and help to remodel the joint. So it is very effective, but you have to, take it, right? And then another thing that is important as you're trying to heal your joint is also do, if you can, light resistance training. Now, it depends on how severe your joint pain is and how much needs to be remodeled. But if you do a little bit of resistance training, you take this, you're reducing the pain, all right? You're reducing the inflammation, you're helping to remodel, you're doing a little bit of very light, but some resistance training with that joint. Take the collagen, all right? That's also ingredients that will help to build the joint. And also take vitamin D3 with K2. And you're taking in some calcium, and with that resistance training, you're actually remodeling your bone. So you're remodeling the bone structure, and you're rebuilding the joint. Now, a lot of times when you've had a chronic problem with the joint, you probably have some erosion of the bone too, because that inflammation will set in and start to reduce the bone matrix. So you want to increase the bone matrix, bring down inflammation, strengthen the musculature in that area, strengthen the tendons and the ligaments. That means you need to do some stretching, and provide the nutrients so you can rebuild the bone structure and the cartilage. But once your cartilage is destroyed, you can't get it back. All right, so it's important to take care of this early on. All right, so and whatever problem you have, to reduce any further damage. So collagen is really important to take if you have had a sports injury or you're just getting older and you're starting to have joint problems. Taking collagen will help to remodel the cartilage, help with the cushioning of the joint, bring down the pain level, all right? Because what it's doing is it's affecting the pathways for the pain, right? And it's providing the nutrients that you need for the joint, which is the ACAN and the collagen 2, all right? And you're doing that resistance training, doing some stretching, right? And you're rebuilding that bone density around that joint. You're improving the strength of the musculature. You're improving the elasticity of the tendons and the ligaments. And over time, and it takes time to do this, but over time, you're actually remodeling. So please go to my store and get the collagen to help alleviate and remodel that joint pain. But if you stack the collagen, the vitamin K2, MK7, the D3, you do resistance training and taking some calcium or drink milk, that will further help rebuild that joint. So I gave you a recipe on how to remodel problem areas for joint pain. That's like shoulder or elbow or wrist or knees, ankles, right? These are problem areas. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen. It's a new product. It works very well. It's very high quality. And again, it's targeting different ways to improve the joint. Helps to remodel with the collagen and the ACAN. It helps to bring down inflammation by affecting the MMP3 and MMP13 enzyme. It affects the EP4, and it helps to provide nutrients to the joint. But again, if you do some light resistance training, add collagen, and do the D3, K2, that should supercharge this protocol to help to remodel the joint. So please go to my store and get the collagen. This is really good if you have a sports injury. That's the end of my broadcast. Use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Click the link in the description. Go to my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.